On a day in the year 2023, people were summoned to a parallel world, but to be more exact, a part of the sea was summoned. The place they were sent to is part of a game of transcendental beings called players, and the whole city is just a pawn in the middle of an all. The players roll the dice, and soon their pieces move. No matter where you are, a mission is always given. They are usually difficult and have varied themes. The objective is to protect the pawn until the finish line. Nothing more, nothing less. All Pawn 76 and the protagonist failed to protect the city. Thus everything collapsed, and those who reside in the pawn boat together. All this story told is just a record of our hero. With this information, they may be able to avoid ruin. So he hopes they avoid the same fate. The last piece of information is never to go against the players, no matter what happens, even if their skills are impressive or strong. Because in the end, everyone there is just a piece in a game. A huge spear invades the cube that houses the city, then is destroying with just one blow. Bodies are common where they live. Someone approaches the corpse. Soon grabs the records that the skeleton was holding. The guy says the strategies are good, but throws the book on the ground where others reside. Walking away, he says he already knows all that a majestic beam overshadows everything and everyone. In the palm of his hand, there are several other cubes. Someone launches an attack, but it was easily stopped. This is our legend who carries the pure drip. The player does not give up but tries to attack him again, but quickly the protagonist moves to counterattack. The blow was so strong it caused a red explosion. It ended with the Transcendental apparently falling dead. In the background, he warns that everyone can defeat players. Just have a guidebook teaching how to do it. And he doesn't plan to wait for his end sitting around just because of this stupid game. So he will end everything before returning to the original world. All this by itself is his great and magnificent ending. On a calm and ordinary day like any other, people are having fun and talking normal. But no one expected that this would change. A blue light emerges from the ground. The protagonist is scared by this. Not only him, everyone around runs desperately for their lives. This great day was the end of a peaceful era. After the teleportation, the boy is still scared. But soon he notices something. He realizes that the wall in front of him has turned into something like a barrier. The boy shouts, questioning what is happening. Most people in the place say they have an excruciating headache. In his mind, the boy says these things only happen in novels and webtoons. To make things stranger, a system window appears, warning that the game has started, so he must roll the dice. With all this happening quickly, he hesitates. The girl points upward, asking everyone to observe that there is something like a cube, but he realizes that it is actually a gigantically colossal die. Some random person rolls the die. The system warns that pawn number 8 will move 3 spaces. The whole city that was standing still apparently started to move. Because of this, people begin to tremble. Our boy gets the idea that he was summoned for a game, but they are not the players. They are the pawns in this crazy game. Assuming how things are happening, the players are the ones who can roll the dice. Actually, the whole city is the pawn. Still, it's strange since they could have summoned just the city, but they summoned them too. The system warns that the space has reached a defensive field, so please roll the dice. After rolling, the difficulty drops by 1, and the defense time is 3 days. Soon after, a kind of map appears next to the city. Both connect as if they were part of a puzzle. Everyone asks if they did something wrong for this to be happening. The system alerts that the defense mission will start soon. If all the base points are destroyed, it will be game over. If this happens, the pawn will die. People say this makes no sense, because if that happens, it's likely everyone will die too. Staying calm, the protagonist knows he can't lose his head. And for now, he should just focus on these announcements. The system tells them to roll their dice. The highest class that can be obtained is the mythical one. An elderly man says something is coming. Some mistake it for the rescue team. But seeing up close, they are ferocious monsters. Of course, after seeing this, everyone runs. The creatures advance without stopping. Unfortunately, the less capable people were caught first. A beast appears behind the boy pointing a large club that hits him precisely, throwing him far away. While flying, he realizes that humans were summoned together to protect the pawn. His body is a pile of cardboard boxes. In his head, everything becomes clear as they have to protect the city until the final goal. A game of dice is being played, and the players are unknown creatures that might be gods or demons. The ogre that hammered the protagonist just watches him lying down. We have thought about advancing to finish the hunt. The girl with fire wings appears, her spear hits the ground, and then causes a huge explosion. A cyclone of fire rises over the ogres. All of them are easily burned. The people who almost died see that they wonder who killed them all in an instant. Her name is Go Hai Ju, and her class is common citizen, and her level is 1. She tells all the wounded to retreat because the military is forming a defense line and compliments for everyone to roll the dice. Their heads are confused by all that, but the girl tells them to roll quickly, and those who receive rare items should go help and those who do not should retreat. After rolling the dice, they receive weapons, shields, and powers. Everyone does as the girl ordered and charges up the monsters. On this day, ordinary lives ceased to exist and now a new era began. Countless people will die. But through these deaths, heroes are born. After this terrible confrontation, Choi Yul is unconscious and badly injured. In his hand, the die was. Bug ended up falling because he is unconscious. But thanks to this, he became someone capable of everything. The die falls on the number 100. A light emits the silhouette of something extraordinary that would soon be recognized as the greatest trash of all, and this is Christina's book, which holds all kinds of information. However, it has a monopolistic designer. So all the people who gain access to this knowledge except the owner will be marked and all their rewards will go to Christina. Due to the battle, there were many injuries and deaths and a destroyed base. The girl with white hair asks if it's all over. Disbelieving, they shout relief for surviving. A military truck arrives at the scene. This is the Korean army, running and helping the wounded civilians. Guy talks to Haiju about her hard work, and compliments that because of her many had the chance to return alive thanks to her helmet having an unshakable mental strength. Tired, she asks if it's all over and the guy replies that he doesn't know yet due to network failures. Because of this, they are using radios to receive reports from each location. But for now, they are heading to Namsan Tower. Behind them, the protagonist shouts, saying that it is not over yet, because the boss will appear soon. He says that in his book, there is all the information. Then they ask both to look, but for them, it's just blank pages. Haiju guesses that only the holder can see the information. In his mind, Kwon says that this item is very overpowered since in their situation information is equivalent to power. Then he says he needs proof that this is real. Opening the book, he describes the items and characteristics of the holder and the helmet is a set of other variety pieces. Looking at Haiju, he says that her favorite lullaby is Shult Mountain and her weapon is a legendary item, and of course, she asks him to stop. Both confirm that the book really works. Since that's the case, the guy is sure the boss is coming. He asks Yul to wait because he will communicate with HQ. A voice echoes through everything and says that maybe he's a bug in the system, because for him the problems of this world are very easy, and compliments that this is why people confine him. This is like an operator who found a system error. If he ever gets out into the world, Kwon shouts, drawing Yul's attention, and soon says he received permission from HQ. But even not trusting, there is nothing more they can do, so they decided to trust his information, and then ask the protagonist to provide as much information as possible, and he confirms that he will help. Grabbing the radio, he asks if they can hear him, since from now on he will speak the defense mission. Yul says they must defend the city every 6 hours because of the monster waves, and at the end of each wave, the strongest appears, the boss, which is a two-end over of difficulty, one that uses magic and close combat at the same time. Summarizing, they need to defend the base 12 times until the third day, which is the boss's appearance. Moreover, they don't need to worry since the strategy is already laid out in the books. So no matter the cost, everyone will survive. After that, you will seek the information on how to return to the original world. The girl, after hearing our commander, blushes, because this man doesn't just think about now, but also about the future. Yul pauses for a moment to catch his breath, then orders everyone to start. Unfortunately, the protagonist didn't know that he missed something because he was previously unconscious. All the people who see or hear the book's information have their rewards stolen at the end of the mission. And the sharing range is not limited to just the boy's words. It also includes people who heard it from others, even if they are just rumors. Everyone and everything that heard will be taken by Christina. With Yul's help, the strategy is working. Little by little, the boss is losing life. The protagonist commands Haiju to attack the monster. In seconds, she disappears. Soon she pierces the creature's belly, but quickly notices that it is different. Not just the hair, but its entire structure has changed. Our boy says cool, thanking her. The happiness is short-lived as the demon king Christina wins. The current population is 193,256, and the sacrifices are 176,542, about 91% of the crowd. But this is just one of the sins Yul commanded until the end of it all. A defensive mission is like a defense game. Monsters walk toward the base, and the pawn's objective is to defend it. The ogres stopped when they saw something. Melt orders them to shoot with long-range firearms that can cover a large area. after attacking them with arrows or magic, and compliments saying that level 1 monsters are not very intelligent. Soldiers say the barricade is very weak, and another says not to spare ammunition, because as soon as they are hurt, they will start to scatter. The creatures run towards the civilians, but are quickly cut down by people with high-level equipment. Yol asks them to maintain overall order. We observe that the Christina book is updated in real time. Just thinking the information already appears. With the help of this book and everyone, they will surely survive. The battle leaves traces of destruction. Both brothers are shot. Kwon orders them to inspect the area and report the situation to Yul. Looking at everyone, the guy knows that the protagonist is in command, but there is only information in the books. So the boy's command ability is something natural, or perhaps it is the book's work. Yul catches the surgeon's attention, saying that the boss is coming, but asks him not to worry, because Haiju will finish it off with just one blow. After all that battle, the girl sleeps to recover her energy, but her sleep is interrupted by a giant earth monster. The name of this boss is Billy the Giant, and his difficulty is 1. Yul is happy to see her awake, and meanwhile, Kwon says he ran out of flares. The creature is hit, but it doesn't seem to have taken much damage. Irritated, the monster hits the ground with extreme force. Our boy warns that he went outside the city because of the boss's destructive power, since there the bases would be destroyed in seconds. Moreover, it is a relief that the creature's movement is slow. Keiju asks how they are going to defeat it with just the 3 of them. He replies that he won't do anything because she will fight it. The monster is heading towards the 3, summoning her spear. The girl asks how she should do it. Yul explains that heroic class items have hidden characteristics, and to unlock them certain conditions must be met. Thus a hidden ability will be activated, but to discover the function, the conditions must be met. But the book has already provided what is needed. Our boy has already told her what to do. Heiju is not sure if it will work. Being very confident, Yul tells her not to be afraid, scared. The girl says she doesn't feel well. Then she thrusts the spear into her belly, saying she trusts the protagonist. The monster prepares a huge attack. Quickly, Keiju is crushed by the boss. Kwon screams, but Yul says she's fine. A red energy appears around the monster, and our boy says that all conditions have been met. A dragon emerges from the bloody flames, and the hidden ability, Fang of Prominence, is unlocked. Both are impressed by that. The Imperial Flame Dragon can be used only once per mission, but is very powerful. The whole terrain is destroyed by the massive attack. An explosion happens at the scene. Kwon says that if this ability were used in the city, it would be terrifying, but the most frightening is Yul's book. There's a lot of dangerous information that, if used for evil, can lead to the city's downfall. But apparently the boy is a good person. The system said they have completed the defense mission and all citizens have been transferred back to the city. The rewards will be delivered and people are happy about that. Others are still surprised to know that this is really a game. The item shop is open for use. At this moment, the nurses buy healing potions to take care of the wounded. With this, the boy feels relieved, but something seems extremely wrong. All the points were taken thanks to the sacrifice effect of sovereignty. After that, they become desperate because there's nothing they can do. Both don't know what to do, and from the protagonist's face, he doesn't believe it. The system calculates the points to be awarded, which are 100 times thanks to the excessive number of sacrifices. A notification arrives for them. This is the leaderboard, and the person with the most points is Kang the 1402. But the first place is outdated, and Yul has over 10 billion. People know that this amount is not normal. Soon they realize that he stole from them. Quickly, they go to confront the thief. Yul warns that he didn't know about this function. Thinking a bit, the surgeon says that points can be exchanged or donated. When he was about to do what Kwon said, Christina's passive ability is activated, and it says that the protagonist cannot share the points. Of course, he gets scared and people are angry with him, calling him a villain. Somehow he tries again, but the passive ability stops him. Angry, Yul throws the book on the ground, and then Haiju attacks to see if it has any effect. After throwing the book away, the boy thinks he's free, but the thing regenerates as if it were alive. This makes him impatient and frustrated. People scream for their loved ones not to die, and others ask Yul to give at least 10 points. With all this commotion, his reputation did not remain the best. A soldier tells Kwon that the number of dead is increasing. Our boy wonders if there is any way to reverse this. A rifle is pointed at his skull, leaving him without reaction. The surgeon says enough is enough, and this is for the greater good. That declares Yul a prisoner who must be put behind bars. Of course, no one is satisfied, and they go over the protagonist and kill. Kwon tells Yul to run as far away as possible, and maybe in the future, fix all this and find a way to return home. Bullet may give emotions, the boy clenches his fist. They realize what the protagonist is trying to do, but he just stops them from doing anything. After spending all the points on agility, Yule disappears. Everyone is very angry with the boy. The system notifies them about something. Unfortunately, the time remaining for the next wave is less than 24 hours. People wonder why the short period. Kwon orders them to run to their safe areas quickly. Soldiers ask the wounded civilians to get into the car. Heiju quickly thinks about what to do. Meanwhile, a person with a loudspeaker says that those who want to fight should go to the left and those who do not should go to the right. Additionally, he asks them to check their status windows and memorize the locations of the temporary bases, then adds that if anyone sees Yule, they should report to the army immediately, then flee the area, and if they are under the book's effect, they should be isolated. Anyone who hides that they are the sacrifice of sovereignty will be considered a lawbreaker. After all this commotion, people are preparing as much as possible until the next wave arrives. Of course, not everyone's well. Some pray for help, others fight to get out of there. The system alerts that the new turn has started, then asks the player to roll the dice. Next, it warns that Pawn 8 will move 4 spaces. The announcement appears informing that the guardians of the demonic pillars will appear, and the goal is to destroy them all before the Demon King is summoned, and adds that the mission duration will be 5 days. Additionally, there will be 3 demonic pillars. The first pillar will have difficulty level 1. Its guardian is the fallen angel with no destiny. The difficulty of the second pillar guardian is level 1. The boss there is the insane brains, which is a super mega intelligent monster. The difficulty of the third pillar is level 3. The monster guarding it is the goblin master swordsman Jack. A while later, we observe the protagonist. Moments later, he smiles, apparently not thrilled. The radio says that the citizens have started attacking the pillars. He'll even try to stop them, but at this moment it is impossible as they are uncontrollable. Maybe they should go too, and he looks to the side and sees that Heiju had disappeared. The soldier reports that she just left. In his mind, Kwon says this is a mess. The process and perfect cooperation were destroyed in just 1 day. The girl went straight to Goblin Jack, level 3. He emanates a terrifying aura. Rushing in, she yells that she will destroy this monster before anyone dies. Because of the attack, debris flies away. But with great ease, her spear is stopped. Still sitting, the goblin retaliates. Then he raises his sword, which is surrounded by a blue aura, and then seemingly cuts the girl in half. Not only her, but everything that was in the path of the blows cut. But something catches Jack's attention. Our boy just saved Heiju from the deadly attack. He quickly tells her to inform everyone that he will use all their rewards and points for himself, and of course, the girl is outraged. Leaving, he orders her to tell everyone to stay out of his way if they don't want to be robbed. The book suddenly appears in the air. In his mind, Yule says it's impossible to return their rewards to the original owners. Quickly, he opens the shop window to buy status with points. As if by magic, all his abilities are maxed out. His strength, wisdom, luck, literally everything was increased. The system alerts many things. That Yule was the first to reach all max stats, which makes people angry. Even after doing this, there are still over 400,000 points left. Because of his achievements, several items are added to his inventory, and with that, he deletes all items for hero class and below. At this moment, Yule has 142 legendary items and over 1,000 heroic ones. The system starts marking the best items. With an arrogant tone, our boy says he will use all of this for himself. Between blood and tears, the Demon King's book will live. Jack observes that grotesquely massive aura. Yule says he will protect the city and return to his old world, because that's the only way to atone for all his sins. The girl looks back, realizing the Guardian is not attacking. Using his dexterity, the protagonist leaves, saying that Jack might attack first. So he heads towards the fallen angel, thus making it known the sole of his shoe. Thanks to his status, fighting these creatures is not difficult. By the looks on the people's faces, it's clear that no one wants the protagonist to live, but he doesn't care about that and just walks past them. Apparently, Yule wants the fallen angel to use its unique characteristic. There are some traits that add weaknesses, and if the wrong conditions are met, this monster will become stronger. If this creature kills more than 100 humans, its evolution will be able to kill all humanity and then stop defending the pillar and just kill humans. That's why you have to take care of the guardians with the most annoying characteristics first. The fallen angel is almost dead. Meanwhile, the protagonist says the most important part is not finishing the mission, but how you finish it. An army car is driving through the city. The sergeant orders everyone to stay away from the pillars until they know Yule's intentions. In his mind, the guy doesn't know if the protagonist just gave up on giving back the points or just didn't find a way. Because before he seemed like a good person, but he can't trust assumptions alone. Someone as intelligent as the boy could easily dominate the entire city. He and Haiju wouldn't stand a chance. Up ahead, Yule's clash is happening. Both in the car notice this. A red energy appears to the side, and then throws the vehicle away. Quan staggers, questioning what that was. But the sight of the protagonist holding the creature's wings impresses him. As if it were nothing, our boy just stands there. The name of his sword is the Divine Divider, and this item once was capable of cutting the heavens and the earth. Moreover, it has an ability to transform parts taken from monsters into items. Getting closer, Quan says he is surprised to see him there. Without saying anything at all, like a ray of light, Yule leaves. In his subconscious, the guy knows the boy has no bad intentions since he said nothing to protect them from the sacrifice of sovereignty. Trembling, the soldier warns that it is very strange. The fallen angel is still alive. The conditions were met after the aura and wings were removed. The special trait was unlocked, and at that moment, the angel transforms into another being. Its name was renamed to the Beast of Corruption with the description that God doesn't care about it. Juan says that military service like this hell. The great and vast dust cloud is raised. The soldiers approach the creature's location. Running, the guy notices that just these 3 monsters are stronger than the entire previous invasion. He soon realizes that maybe the protagonist left this monster for them to defeat. The abomination does not stay still and starts attacking everything it sees, be it human or not. All it cares about is killing. All the soldiers run in fear. Still, this does not affect Quan because of his helmet. Calming shoots at the monster and draws its attention. He plans to do this until at least the reinforcements arrive. But not everything is rosy, and the abomination jumps towards him. He knows that if he can hold on until then, many lives can be saved. But he's quickly crushed. Yule just watches all that with a terrifying face. He says that one is down. A green aura illuminates the monster's hand. The energy was so strong, and it injured it. Quan's helmet released its hidden ability. The conditions were met, and the activation was complete. A god dominates Quan's body, and all of his weapons are now imbued with divine energy. Invoking, he shouts that the goddess's hammer will eliminate all of fallen. The fanatic ability was activated, and at this moment, the soldiers receive power UPS. They are crazy, but at the same time strong. Yule says this is more sinister than he thought. Before this happened, we see Quan's superior giving him a position. Being very frank, he compliments, saying that he will be the battalion leader. This may seem a bit uncomfortable, but there is nothing he can do. Writing on the paper, the superior says that the lack of information is horrible for the current situation. With times like these, they need someone like Quan, who always has a calm look. Not only that, someone extremely rational. Someone who never loses their head, no matter the circumstances. A cold vigilant capable of making logical judgments. Apparently, this personality of Quan was obliterated. A soldier launches his maximum attack, the divine buttstock. Instead of shooting, the guys are hitting the monster, and it is still working. Quan playeth the fly in the creature's head, then shouts, saying that this is all in the name of the goddess. The announcement is made saying that Quan's group has taken down the tower, and his superior says he has a good eye for choosing soldiers. Apparently, the protagonist's strategy worked. Even after the transformation, the monster's life was still low. And besides, their contributions were reset, making Quan have all the rewards. Looking to the side, he asks what he thinks. Impressively, the boy is talking to Jack. Yo says that not being able to talk to others because of the book is bad, but thanks to the goblin, he managed to ease that, then asks if Jack wants to make a bet. He doesn't quite understand, but the protagonist says that if he wins, he will break the Demon King's seal. Of course, this puts Jack on alert elsewhere. Hiju draws her spear, then cuts the monster named Anti-Human Machine. But there is not just one, but several of them. She says she came there to help, but it seems that this never ends. And above all, with every passing second, these machines keep improving. Because of this, she must end it quickly, then orders everyone to retreat. Unfortunately, no one listens to her, saying they won't let her take the points. They don't do this out of malice, as they need this to save their families. Some extras are behind the rock, waiting for the boss to have low health to finish it off. Both point magic-class crossbows. The monster rotates its head 180 degrees. This scares the guys. The destructive laser beam goes in their direction, but thanks to Haiju, they survive. The force is great, and maybe she can't hold on for much longer. Because of the destructive power, everything goes flying. Still, she does not show weakness before the boss. She was going to order the guys to run away, but they were already far, asking to be saved. Something strange is happening with the creature. We see that it identifies the factors to gain an advantage against Haiju. After the analysis, the machine evolves to become invincible against the girl. At the same moment, she knows she needs to stop this as soon as possible. But the other monsters try to stop her, and then they leave her immobile, unable to do anything. To get out of this mess, Haiju transforms. With that, she throws fire at all the monsters. The boss just watches her from afar. Shouting, she orders everyone to move back immediately. Soon after, a terrible confrontation with the boss begins. People run, fearing imminent death. The beam of light approaches the creature, hitting it violently. Because of the explosion, the civilians are thrown. Despite this, she smiles in relief. But unfortunately, the creature defended against the blow, and then transformed into a level 2 boss. Haiju notices the creature disappeared, in seconds and appears behind the girl. Quickly, it tries to attack her in all possible ways. But none of this is making any impact on the boss. Exhausted, Haiju ends up unconscious. Before fainting, she sees the protagonist saving her again. Then with just one attack, the boy splits the monster's head in two. He's doing something strange, and Haiju wonders what it is. A strong attack emerges from the depths. The ground starts to crack, and everything goes flying. Ended up that the boss is alone. Looking at the ground where the girl should have been, there is nothing left. And then it realizes that the target, Haiju, has disappeared, but traces were found, and now the boss begins tracking. The queen's brain was compromised. Because of this, the conditions of the unique characteristic were activated, and its ability is called insane order. We see the protagonist looking at the sky, saying that it took longer than expected for the pillar to be brought down. Both the first pillar, which has many people attacking it, and the second pillar, which also has many pawns trying to bring it down. Besides, the army is moving to help the people. And of course, he could easily take down all the pillars, but that would be meaningless, because he needs to conquer the entire game, not just the mission. Like it or not, the whole city needs to get stronger. For that, a great commander is needed, and a strong champion unit. Opening her eyes, the girl wonders if she is alive. Looking back, she questions if he saved her. The person who helped the girl was Jack the Goblin. This scares her a lot, but he interrupts her, telling her to be quiet. For a moment, Haiju stays calm, then becomes impressed by Jack's ability to speak. Walking away, the goblin says he took care of her injuries, and because there is not much time, it's better to start soon. Then he adds that Yule said that after a great defeat, and then finding a teacher to cultivate one's strength is a cliché. Of course, the girl understands nothing of what the goblin says. Apparently, there is something moving in the sky. It's the boss who does not give up and wants at all costs to kill Haiju. When the target is found, the annihilation mode is activated. Thus, blue lights emanate in the air. As if it were nothing, Yule defends. With the monster's brain, the protagonist confused it to think he's Haiju. Apparently, the boss has not realized it yet since it is being disoriented. Taking a few steps back, our boy catches its attention. The creature releases overwhelming energy, and in the blink of an eye rushes at Yule with all its might. Several explosions occur, and the civilians notice this. Unintentionally, the monster ends up destroying the tower, which is completely destroyed because of the attack. Looking at the book, our boy just says that this level should be enough. Calmly, the protagonist says that because of the boss, other people's problems were solved, and this irritates. The sound of sword and spear clashing can be heard from afar for some reason. Jack is teaching Haiju. He asks her to use that power. Planes are summoned. Taking a few steps back, the goblin asks the girl not to forget. Since the power is not hers, it's better not to overdo it to avoid getting hurt, and therefore, instead of using it all at once, it's better to take only a portion. Instead of the ability consuming her, she should dominate it. With all these teachings, Haiju seems to be learning. After the battle, the girl talks about the bet the protagonist made with Jack about her defeating the robot. Well, it would be. Haiju questions if this is possible. In her mind, the girl feels a little uneasy since the goblin remains silent. Jack asks why she let him teach her standing up. Haiju says she doesn't know, since the game has main missions she doesn't know about, and if she keeps thinking too much about the end, she will never find the answer. Therefore, first at all costs, she must strengthen her body. After all, that is her way of living. The goblin seems to like the answer. Jack says he thought the girl was being used by Yule, but she's just a martial artist forging her own path. Without wasting time, the goblin says he will get tough now. After much effort and training, 3 days pass. Some people seem desolate. They wonder when this will end. A percentage of humans want to help the army, but fear prevents them from doing so. Something cracks and crosses the underground. This is the boss that was fighting against the protagonist. Because of Yule, its head is not clear, and it identifies all those people as Haiju. After the target is discovered, annihilation mode is activated. The humans run to avoid dying while being attacked. It says the target was hit, but realizes it was deceived after seeing what it hit. In a few moments, the monster notices something. The real Hinju appears behind it. A woman questions what that is, because in front of her stands an angel. We see that the girl inherited Jack's swordsmanship and now also possesses the illusion blaze armor. The goblin and the protagonist are watching the fight. Our boy questions what the chances are of her winning, and Jack says it's 50-50, since the robot is her natural enemy. But she has the advantage since she has her martial arts. Because of her strike, the creature is thrown back, but it soon tries to counterattack. Jack says that if his seed grows at the right time, then that damn machine won't be a problem. 3 days had passed since the mission began and only one pillar was destroyed. Because of the soldiers' persistence, a second pillar was finally destroyed. Heijo has been battling the boss for almost an entire day. Soon the same was defeated by her. The people await the end of the mission. After some time, most of the citizens were healed and returned to the game. A few days have passed since the mission began, but people's self-esteem has evolved greatly, and now they stand up saying they can do it. Happiness is recurring since no one needed Yule. That's what they thought, since in reality the boy helped a lot. Jack says his apprentice won, so he will keep his promise, and add that this time it's his turn. The army moves to get food. A person on the radio complains to Quan because he only asked him to investigate the area, but instead he destroyed a pillar. With a tired face, he asks the surgeon to forget about it. Then he says he will promote him if he does well again. Apparently, Quan doesn't like this, but there's nothing he can do. Haiju catches his attention, saying they should go. Quan asks if she will be okay, and she says she promised her master she would manage. In her memory, Jack says that next time Haiju meets him, they will be enemies. The surgeon is worried if he can win, since it's a level 3 difficulty monster and even Haiju couldn't defeat it. Quan questions the protagonist's intentions. A very loud noise startles them both. The portal above is being broken, and the girl sees who it is. The person causing the commotion is Yule. His kicks make everything and everyone tremble. After several consecutive strikes, the Demon King's seal is shattered, and no one knows what to say. Because of this, the objective was altered, and a special rift appears in the sky. The mission is to defeat the Demon King, and in case of failure, it's game over. The guys say that Yule is a terrible psychopath. Both wonder what the hell he is thinking. Jack says he didn't expect this to happen, and adds that there are many interesting humans in these times. The goblin jumps towards the rift. Landing on a rock, he prepares to kill monsters. In a blink of an eye, the creatures were killed. Not only that, but those around them also died. Everyone is frightened by such power. Jack says this is a gift and a lesson for his student, so she better dedicate herself. Disappearing into the darkness, he says he hopes to see her next time. We see that the protagonist entered the special rift. Because of the angel's halo, Yule is protected from the infernal demonic dimension. Walking, he says that getting there was easier than expected. As if he were going to a bakery, the protagonist calls the Demon King and asks if he is Christina. The creature says it has never heard that name, but soon asks how Yule got there. The protagonist says he thought Demon Kings interacted. Leaving, Yule says this was a waste of time. Looking back, he tells the level 6 difficulty monster that its opponent is arriving. For some reason, the Demon King seems friendly, but then he punches the protagonist, saying this is a bit embarrassing. This scares him, and having no choice, he retaliates. Jack arrives at the location where the Demon King is, but upon seeing the scene, he understands nothing. The creature's arms were simply deleted. Laughing, Yule apologizes as that was against the rules. Taking a few steps back, he says it was a mistake, and the Demon King questions how a mere human did that. In a few moments, he asks how the protagonist dares to do this. Our boy asks if Jack won't switch places. He says he would like to, but the Demon King doesn't seem to want to. Unfortunately, things do not go as planned, because if the goblin fights the Demon King, a hidden event would occur, and then both would die mutually. Thus, tons of points would go to the citizens. Without leaving a gap, a blow from the creature causes great destruction. Buckus does not leave a scratch on the boy because of his armor, which is a legendary class item. In his mind, the protagonist says there's nothing he can do. At this moment, he will just wait a bit for people to accumulate points. The Demon King punches Yule several times and he does nothing. This leaves Jack very surprised. Outside the spatial rift, people are killing the remaining monsters. The soldiers attack and evacuate the civilians. Juan is very tired from the incessant battle. The creatures are not strong, but are many. If it continues like this, they won't last much longer. The surgeon says that Yule became the city's greatest enemy the moment he broke the Demon King's seal. So if anyone dies today, it's his fault. Hydra drives towards the shelter. Quickly, she jumps out and cuts the monsters that are easily defeated. She shouts, ordering everyone to a safe place. Most complain since this is all the protagonist's fault. Aurora arrives and asks if Haiju will let anyone speak ill of her boyfriend. Embarrassed, the girl denies this fact. Kang just watches her eating snacks, then throws one to Haiju. Leaving, she says it's for Sivmer. Apparently, the bag was empty. Returning to where the protagonist is, Jack stands in front of him, telling him to step back. Then he asks if Yule has any affection for him. He then says that if they had met in another world, he might have invited him for some drinks. Then Jack charges at the monster. Because of the goblin, our boy feels a bit sad as his goal was to make him kill himself along with the Demon King. Still, it's too late to fulfill the conditions. And even if it were, he wouldn't let Jack die because of his earlier words. A hidden ability is activated after their friendship reaches the maximum level. This immediately puts him on alert, but realizing this is a great opportunity, he smiles. The Demon King is very strong, and because of that, Jack is already exhausted. His aura alone is very intimidating. Tyre the Goblin says he will use his ultimate move, even if it has a high lethality rate. All this is for his friend and his disciple. As if it were nothing, the boss is defeated. The speed at which this was done scares Jack. The Demon King still tries to retreat to recover, but then was hit by another blow, and the person with the most contribution is Yule. The system announces that all summoned monsters will be annihilated. Innocently, the protagonist smiles at Jack. With the book's ability, Yule recruits Jack before he disappears. He's on alert that the spiritual contract is made. Finally, the portal is closed and the protagonist falls, saying that he is hated by humans and now allied with a monster. In his book is the figure of the goblin. Yul says that with each passing time, he feels his humanity slipping away. This time, the points are distributed normally since no one absorbed information from Christina's book. Teju feels relieved as the mission ended on the rooftop. Kang questions if Yul was a golden boy or maybe a human bomb. Quan says he doesn't know much about games, but this one apparently is about defending a base from certain enemies. In this case, he could even form a supreme unit, but maybe it wouldn't be possible. An existence that in a short time reached maximum level and now defeated the Demon King. Such a phenomenon would be allowed within the game. A system alerts that an abnormal unit has been detected. Apparently, the player opens Yule's status window. The system gives 4 alternatives for the god to choose. Without hesitation, he clicks on Annihilation. For a moment, the protagonist feels something, as if he had been observed for an instant. The system announces that an error occurred. For now, it will start unit inspection. In seconds, it says that now this unit will be hidden from other players. People are acting normally, distributing their points. A guy has an item that can transmit his voice to distant places. He says that everyone has received new dice that can go from common class to mythical. Quan receives a heroic fork that even if he loses it, will return to its owner. Looking at it, the sergeant notices that some items are also bad. Apparently, it's also possible to trade the gains. People are already recruiting to join different groups. Quan remembers what Kiju said about her saying she's not very good in the military field. Also, there are many people who are scared, and his duty is to help them as much as possible. The girl asks Sid not to worry as she will also help with the missions when possible. Quan says humans adapt too quickly to extreme situations. Calmly, we observe the protagonist. He says that the citizens are doing well. Both Quan and Haiju have their roles in this place, but how they will act will be important from now on. If Yule's decisions are wrong, the entire city will be ruined. Our boy was about to start thinking of a plan when someone calls him. It's Kang who greets him. Yule looks at his book to see where she is. Even knowing, he questions how she got up there. Approaching the hero's face, Kang says she thought he would be sad for being isolated. But apparently, Yule is fine. With all these words said, the protagonist asks what she means by that. Kang says they can't talk now, and soon Yule becomes suspicious of the situation and her actions. Smiling, she continues saying that the protagonist can simply look in his book, but the boy says thoughts are not information. Grabbing a rope, the woman says that's good. Leaving, she says she just wanted to see his face. The face of the fool who can conquer everything, but chose the hardest path. Like a Limitic, the woman jumps off the cliff. Our boy questions what the hell is happening. Later, the sunset arrives. An announcement says that the city has gained experience and now convenience will be improved. Also, the infrastructure will be partially renewed. Yule says that the more people spend points, the more experience the city gains. Soon, the points the protagonist used previously were not recorded. Looking at the book, he questions where the points he spent went. Probably to Christina, but our boy wonders if it's okay to use it. Elsewhere, we see Quan greeting his superior. The woman from before observes, saying that the soldiers are doing well. And then, thinking about the situation, she wonders where she should stay to be comfortably accommodated, because the city is dangerous and she's fragile. The system announces that a new turn has begun. and the house where the city landed is the trap of the Golden God. The mission duration is 2 weeks, and the objective is to satisfy the Golden God, and there will be 4 maps. Korn ponders because the time is now long. Other people say there are no summoned monsters. Another announcement says that rewards are individual and the amount depends on how much you satisfy the Golden God. Peiju doesn't know what to do as this is very different from the previous objectives. Not only that, but the mission has main descriptions. The girl decides to ignore it for now, since her job at this moment is to look at the entire map. Laughing, the protagonist says the player is very lucky to roll the dice. If this goes well, the city will benefit a lot, and until then, Yule decides to use Christina. A spear appears in the book, thus piercing through our boy. Of course, he is scared as this was sudden, but the spear disappears as if it never existed. The Demon King Christina applies a punishment on the protagonist for not bringing sacrifices. A lightning bolt starts to drain Newell's HP. The book warns that if he doesn't bring offerings, he will die soon. And when that happens, Christina will find another owner. A few days after the mission began, people find a dungeon. A guy with glasses questions if they should alert the army. Drawing swords from his back, his friend says that the points they get for alerting the soldiers are scarce. So now that they are in another world, they should make history. In a few seconds, terror takes over the entire area. A mysterious monster emerges from within the dungeon. The one with the hat says it must be the doorman. Since before coming to this world, they were guild leaders in games, and for a moment, we see the protagonist. Apparently, he looks like a lunatic, telling everyone the information. Yul says he needs to use the poison for the mission, but the guy doesn't care and asks him to stop. Our boy doesn't listen and continues saying there's a secret dungeon after finishing this one. Hours later, in another place, the person from before is angry about becoming the sacrifice of sovereignty. He says this is very unfair. The guy with glasses says Yule is at max level. All he can do now is sit and cry. Moreover, this is an isolation field for people like them who have become sacrifices. Everyone talks about the protagonist, about how he seemed desperate. One guy says it was so scary he almost wet himself in fear. Still, he wanted to continue hunting but didn't want to benefit Yule, so he came here. Our boy looks at the book. It says 2,000 people are even registered. For now, the punishment will be slightly reduced. Yule says it's a bit more bearable now, but he suspects since this wasn't there before and then realizes that Christina is hiding things. Smiling, he says this doesn't hinder his plans at all. He knows Christina thinks she has him in her hands, but in the end she will find out who is really in control. This excites him, and soon he will try something new. Sector B, Emperor Griffin's Nest. Its difficulty is 3, and its description shows it has the blood of ancient dragons. The monster charges at the boy to defeat him. Elsewhere, Haiju attacks a creature, which is an earth troll difficulty level 2. Apparently, she is training her martial arts. Quickly, she beats the monster with just 1 blow. Getting off it, the girl thanks her master for making his apprentice stronger. Kang finds a chest and informs Haiju. She calls her miss, but she asks the girl to be informal. Suddenly, a debate arises. Haiju calls Kang a piranha and asks why she is following her. Without any shame, she says that sticking with her brings more benefits. Observing this, the girl is incredulous. Kang asks if she will abandon a weak and defenseless citizen, which catches Haiju off guard. Leaning against the wall, she asks the woman to wait a moment. A while later, Haiju gives a third of the items, and then Kang says quality is better than quantity. Since they can't deduce if it's treasure or not until they get to the city, that's why she will take everything, which makes the girl think and asks how Kang believes in that. The woman replies that she knows just by looking. Haiju says Kang is very strange but still very cool. Following her, Haiju asks if she has no friends. Kang says the girl is very naive, because the enemies are not just the monsters, and this is a treasure hunt, not a peaceful mission. Battles between pawns will happen occasionally sooner or later. Since the treasure is not claimed until after the evaluation, there will be bandits who might rob people. After all, it's easier to fight humans than monsters. In House in the City, police investigate a crime scene. Detective Seo arrives to check the situation. This is another case of stolen treasure. A guy says the citizen claimed he was drugged, and when he woke up, there was nothing left. The detective says he should have handed it over to the Golden God right away. Next to him, another person says it takes about 12 hours to deliver, and it's as if the system suggests doing so. Seo says this kind of reasoning is pathetic, and the guy retorts, saying it depends on everyone's interpretation. Both police officers question the man's attitude towards the detective. Suddenly, he shouts, warning that Yule has appeared, and he's riding a griffin. There's no time to react. Seo is a legendary class item and immediately attacks the protagonist. Because of the blow, a crater opens in the ground. The man in the suit asks to evacuate everyone from there. In his mind, he says that Seo's attitude is commendable, but Yul is at max level. This is like suicide. If this becomes a habit, it won't take long for him to die. The detective is surprised to see that Yul did not die. Besides, the boy didn't even try to dodge or retaliate. Later, news spreads through the city that Yul was captured and is now being interrogated without any resistance. Excited people grab their equipment and run to hunt treasures since the fear of the protagonist appearing is gone. Currently, the Golden God does not seem happy, but that's not of extreme importance. Let's go to the Goblin Village sector. There the creatures are being defeated one by one. A soldier named Huang says this part has been cleared. Going a bit deeper into the village, there are more monsters. Lee shoots the goblins with his heroic class weapon. They fall to the ground due to the shots. Both soldiers argue, which allows a monster to escape. But quickly the surgeon steps in and manages to hit the creature. He says that when they return to the base, both of them will run 10 laps around the entire municipality. The surgeon informs the platoon commander that the area has been cleared. Quan says they are almost finished as well. A mage-type goblin summons several stones. Smiling, he says that when his god arrives, no one will be able to stop him, and their end will be tragic like a withering flower. Without wasting time, a soldier uses his explosion ring. His name is Kim, and he is level 3. A massive destruction occurs, and the goblin is defeated. Quan says the guy didn't even let the monster finish his speech. But anyway, this isn't a cartoon. Destroying a door in the village, the soldier informs that he found the target. The 18 citizens reported missing were found with only a few injuries. A little later, at the military command headquarters, the guy says he will send reinforcements to help the wounded, and then continues explaining that he will make the goblin's den an outpost. Looking at Quan, he asks if the mist knows what Yu plans and soon answers that he doesn't. Honestly, the surgeon says that the most frightening thing about the book is not the information with the protagonist, that he doesn't think the boy is an enemy. Outside the base, the griffin yawns. People admire the monster and say it belongs to Yul. Inside the cell where our boy is, he takes the opportunity to eat. The guy jokes saying that even a max-level person feels hungry. Seo says that for now, Yul is a criminal who has committed several crimes. Then the hero takes responsibility for his actions. The detective says he has worked there for 20 years and sees a criminal's face every day. So he is sure of one thing. Yul is not a bad person, and it is likely that everything that happened was an accident. The guy approaches, saying this would be like the Good Samaritan law, but it doesn't exist in Korea. Smiling, Siu says he will clear up the misunderstanding people have about the protagonist. Dropping a spoon on the table, Yul says he wasn't Anikia to seek help. At that moment, the detective doesn't understand. But the conversation is interrupted when a soldier arrives with urgent news. A person with a heroic class item is trying to commit robbery and murder. Since there are many strong people, the team is struggling. They immediately head to a bus to go to the robbery site. Dushik says that when missions have no rewards, there is no cooperation. And that's how it should have been from the beginning. Great chaos for a new order. That would be fitting for a world of superpowers. Seo complains, saying the guy should think like a sane person. Besides, he doesn't understand these things from another world. But anyway, they're still humans. A person is about to die and then calls for help. The attacker doesn't care about anything, but the detective appears to intercept the blow, then says he will arrest him for robbery and attempted murder. And if he tries to resist, things will get a bit violent. Scared, he quickly surrenders. Seo takes him to the bus. Dushik says that the laws of a land no longer have meaning. The best choice would be for them to become the kings of the city, and with his help, it wouldn't be difficult. The detective says that's why he always keeps him close, as the most dangerous person in the city is him. In his thoughts, Dushik says something is strange. No matter what he does, he can't guess what Yul is thinking. But he quickly realizes something. Looking at Seo, he says that from today they will be busy. Since the protagonist is in prison, it's a golden opportunity for others. Dushik thinks Yul's true goal is to cause destruction, but Seo defends him, saying the boy is good. The guy says people are not laughing but hiding. In the cell, we observe the protagonist sitting, sweating. He says it's now a battle of patience. The system says Christina is still unsatisfied and needs more sacrifices. Our boy uses an item to multiply himself. Smoke appears around him. Soon his other self appears in front of him. Using the invisibility cloak, Yu hides, asking the clone to do a good job, and lasts as long as he can without being caught. After the protagonist leaves, the clone awakens. A soldier arrives, questioning why Yul is taking so long to come out. Turning around, the clone doesn't have a friendly face and intimidates the soldier a bit. As if it would help, he says there are reinforcements, so it's better not to try anything. Suddenly, Yul's clone leaves the cell. Calmly, he says he won't try anything. The griffin outside starts behaving strangely. For some reason, it begins to fly. People are confused. We see that the real protagonist is still invisible. He says that stage 1 of his plan is complete. Now begins stage 2. The army split into 2 groups, those handling the inside and soldiers handling the outside. Additionally, citizens can also choose one of the 2 groups. Humans without combat skills found their functions. Since then, the mission has been progressing smoothly. Inside the outpost that was formerly the Goblin Village, Kon says they finished a sector of this size in just 2 days. But if humans cooperated, it would have been much easier from the start. The surgeon recalls his superior saying that the city's atmosphere isn't very good. More and more treasures are being stolen and human greed only grows with time. The people protecting the city are struggling due to a lack of equipment. Kwon asks if the army will act, and he responds that they won't because it's dangerous. If the army handled the police tasks, civilians would think the situation is critical. Their duty is to act when necessary. Kwon remains silent, thoughtful. Then he says that even if the world changes, people will never change. And he adds that knowing this causes terrible affliction. Later, somewhere else, a guy is being taken over by something dark. The bandit is using the person as a guinea pig to test his poison combinations. We see that the item he uses to cause this is the abandoned magic pearl. His equipment evolves every time you use it. The poison around the guy starts to disappear. With a macabre smile, the unknown person says you will kill him yet, because he still has to test several other poison combinations. The civilian says he will hand over all the treasures, begging for mercy. Like a lunatic, the guy says experience is the greatest treasure. The last thing heard are screams. Later, the detective arrives at the crime scene. Dushik says this weapon is very convenient. Both notice something ahead. Observing the body, Siu says the killer didn't even touch the treasure. It's unclear whether it was just one person or a group. Dushik states that something dangerous has emerged. When the Demon King Newell was imprisoned, something else took his place. Happy, the detective says the boy isn't a bad person. And he acknowledges that all this is happening because of him. So later, he will need to have a deep conversation with Yul. Dushik asks if he thinks the protagonist will say what he thinks, and C replies that in times like this, of course not. But he will do something more efficient, which is to question the people close to him. On the griffin, the boy sneezes, then wonders if he has some kind of cold. The system indicates that the satisfaction of the golden god hasn't even reached 10%. This worries you a bit. Going to the desert sector, he says there's nothing to be done. Ahead, there's a large sand tornado. The griffin is already tired from so much flying. Our boy says they've arrived, so he tells the bird to rest a bit. No matter what the citizens do, he has already taken all the valuable treasures. Smiling, Yule tells the creature to eat and fatten up a lot. Surprisingly, our boy is creating his own golden god. Elsewhere, the 3 corporals say to lead the mission to them. Kwon asks them not to be so dramatic since he's only going to make a statement about Yule. Like children, the soldiers shout for him to bring ice cream when he returns. When the sergeant is a bit far away, the 3 are happy because now they'll have a day off. Another sergeant observes their attitude, but then says there's no problem taking a vacation. The 3 goofballs dance happily near him, shouting they asked for a beer. And meanwhile, the sergeant thinks he can't leave the idiots alone. A hand hovers in the darkness. 4 blows are struck at the protagonist. Then he falls to the ground stunned. Jack says it's done. Now that he has pierced all your pressure points, the pain should have subsided. Our boy thanks the goblet, since he has helped a lot. Currently, Jack has become one of Yule's 4 sovereigns. There are many questions the boy wants to ask, but it's better to wait until the situation stabilizes. And now he will take advantage of the moment that Sergeant Kwon is in the city to rob the houses in the jumble sector. Something happens to Kwon. He quickly orders the soldier to turn the car around, because now they are in an ambush. The enemies take potions to keep attacking them continuously. Kwon questions if these guys have lost their minds by attacking the military. Even so, if he retaliates, it will be chaos because, like it or not, these guys are civilians. The sergeant decides to flee until reinforcements arrive. They flee at high speed so the people cannot catch them. Keeping calm, Kwon notices that the crime rate is worse than he imagined. The stronger humans might treasure hunting, leaving the non-combatants in the city. Thus, the best environment for criminals was created. If a powerful bandit appears, the city will become dangerous, and meanwhile, the soldier shouts, saying something is following them. And besides, that thing is very fast. The city is in chaos, and our boy is currently fighting a lizard. Its difficulty level is 3. There is not just one. There are several preparing to strike the protagonist. But of course, none of them stand a chance of even scratching him. With just one blow, the monsters evaporate. Yul says that because of Jack, his body feels lighter. By his side, he tells him not to overexert himself, and adds that this place is similar to the demon dimension. In the demon realm, the monsters get stronger and the boy's pain also increases, because Christina is the demon king, making the punishment worse. Yol says he would like to finish this quickly and leave with the treasure. In fact, his most important goal is not to satisfy the golden god, but to complete the mission in the easiest way. That means getting many treasures, and then obtaining the maximum rewards he can. The protagonist says that the chaos happening in the city is because of his plan to get treasures. A monster made of poison attacks the soldier and Kwan. The two are not scared and have already called for reinforcements. Before being there, the sergeant earned a promotion reward. His superior said he got on a mission and also gave some items to his subordinates. Kwan didn't say much, only that he still couldn't get used to it. The item is heroic class, providing momentary shelter for the user. A safe area is created with a range of 3 meters and lasts for 3 minutes. Basirja tells the soldier to stop because if they act hastily, they could suffer. Before doing anything, someone jumps onto the moving car. The guy catches their attention. Walt asks him to call the leader because he has no intention of talking to lackeys. The man starts laughing, saying the sergeant is good at offending. Pointing his hand at them, he says he is the leader, and orders them to obey, that they don't want to die there. The entire car is enveloped in poison. Things start to melt. This scares the soldier, but Kwan remains calm thanks to his helmet. In his mind, he notes that this smoke is corrosive and the area the poison covers is wide. Moreover, if things go wrong, their fate will be no different from the people outside. For now, they are fine since the item is protecting them. Kwan says he can surrender if he listens to his conditions. Fearlessly, the surgeon tells the guy he can become his subordinate. This way, he can also make him more human. The bandit asks if Kwan is in his right mind. Beside him, the soldier becomes desperate, questioning the attitude. The guy notices something behind him, but it's too late, and the surgeon says he did it, just to distract him and leave an opening for the reinforcements to attack. And then the bandit was taken up. He says he ended up playing too much, and because of the wind, he cannot control his poison. He adds that he doesn't know who it is, but he is definitely at a disadvantage. Trying to counterattack, the guy makes a ball of poison, and then takes a slingshot in his hand to shoot at the individual. The projectile is fast and heads towards the target. Before the shot hits Seal, the sergeant moves him out of the way. Like a beam of light, the poison bullet hits the ground. The wind tornado dissipates, and where the projectile hit, the ground started melting. The detective tries to take the lead, but Kwan warns that the enemy is not alone. Steo says he can't run away, but the sergeant asks him to consider it a strategic retreat. The two begin to argue at the worst possible moment. While they bicker, the criminal has already escaped. Several explosions occur in the city. The humans on the ground are criminals complaining about being in the outer area. They soon question why they had the misfortune of running into Haniju. Quickly, both try to flee the scene. The girl shouts for them to stop running, but the guy throws a bottle at her. Heiju doesn't seem to notice the danger, but the old woman warns her not to get close. Before it hits the ground, the girl catches the beer bottle, and with a skillful maneuver, she manages to prevent the explosion. The old lady is relieved after seeing this. Hanju questions who those people were. The old woman informs her that they are bandits, but she has never seen them so organized before, and adds that some of them have poisoned bottles that currently have no antidote. Luckily, thanks to her, everything was resolved. In her subconscious, the girl remembers what Kang had said about humans. Keiju decides to put treasure hunting in the hole for now, since something strange is happening in the city. We see someone watching our boys cloned. Apparently, Kang had already figured out the deception. Eating a cookie, she wonders what Yu was planning, because without him, the city will soon be destroyed from within. Elsewhere, Jack warns that a big battle is about to begin. The protagonist says he expected chaos, but didn't know there would be such crazy people. Defeating the monsters, the goblin suggests that the boy could just cut them down, but Yol refuses, because he needs something more chaotic, and these people who have appeared will only speed up the process. Jack says it's very hard to guess the protagonist's thoughts. Our boy asserts that soon he will understand, and for now, they will clear this dungeon. The large door opens for the two. Inside, a monster says it's been a long time since a human descended so deep. The creature is another demon king who resides at the edge of the abyss. Moving forward, Yul asks if the boss knows Christina. The monster says he doesn't like the protagonist's tone. Without giving him time to react, the boy charges. A barrier stops him for hitting. The boss calls him a fool for thinking that would scratch him. Quickly, he says he despises that kind of attitude and launches several boulders. Immediately, the protagonist is thrown back, saying that this is a magical barrier that nullifies all physical damage. This demon king is a mage type. If Korn brought his platoon here, they would be exterminated in seconds. Jack and Yu will dodge the boss's attacks. Besides the demon king, there are also other dangers to face, both cursed items and plagues. Wielding a large axe, the protagonist says he will defeat and sign to alter the dungeon's difficulty. The monster creates several barriers to defend itself. With the axe that transforms physical power into magic, our boy manages to kill it and adds that he will leave all dangerous areas easy for the citizens. At the West Police Station, inside the meeting room, Seo is talking about something. The topic of conversation is about the poison bandit called Inuji. Jushik says the best thing would be to arrest him, but with their current strength, it won't be possible. The detective plans to carry out a joint operation with the police, the army, and good citizens. Haiju fully agrees with this idea. Kwon knows that the longer this lasts, the worse it will get. If they lose the battle, everyone will die. Since the superiors planned this, they must know the risks. This means they are confident in winning this fight happening within the city. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, the Demon King has not yet been defeated and says he has brought suffering to countless people. And for a long time, no mortal has been able to hurt him, but Yol managed to do it easily. Again, the protagonist asks if the boss knows Christina. He questions if this is related to the convocations. Yol doesn't know if the monster is talking about the missions. The creature explains that they also receive missions just like humans, and usually, it's to destroy them. Perhaps some monsters have different convocations, and meanwhile, the boy wants the boss to say more. But he says it doesn't matter, because the more he tells, the closer the user of that book comes to finding death. At this moment, Yul realizes the monster knows something. Laughing, the creature says he won't be able to see the destruction this will cause. The protagonist tries to do something, but Jack stops him, saying it's better to leave. Before disappearing, the boss says it's good to see your anguished face. Yul shouts for him to wait, but it's too late, and an earthquake begins to shake the ground. A lightning bolt emerges from it and illuminates the entire area. The voice of the Demon King resonates, saying he will wait for the great condemnation of Palm number 8 that will be induced by the protagonist. The goblin asks if Yul is okay, and he responds that he is. But in his mind, he thinks about his situation and the secrets that reside in the book. Jack asks if he wants to search for information, but the boy says no because it's enough to know that there is a Demon King who knows Christina. For now, he will work on his goal of adjusting the area's difficulty, which will take at least 3 days. Jack doesn't know if humans will be able to survive for so long, so he cares for his apprentice and friends. After 3 days, there is already a great commotion in the city. There are many injured due to the battle, and there is no medication to treat them. There are more victims in fights between humans than for monsters. Seo and Haiju are being attacked by poison smoke. What will they be able to do to get out of this situation? Someone wanted to see them give up hope. The masked man with his dark power stated that their legendary items wouldn't be enough for his downfall. According to him, none of the soldiers wanted to pour their efforts into this battle, but wanted to make an easy profit instead. All of this was due to the absence of a chief. This world needed an emperor who could rule humans, and no one should be as strong as this absolute ruler. The girl suddenly claimed that the title of strongest belonged to Yul, that the masked man affirmed that Yul didn't come to face him as he was aware of his inability to win. The villain was even disappointed since he had prepared a secret weapon to face him, when suddenly, the man was targeted by gunshots. Then he managed to use his powers in order to remain unharmed. His barrier, which is able to stop bullets, is also an automatic defense, meaning that the antagonist was gaining new abilities as the fight went on. With that, the masked man decided to counterattack. As the soldier evaded the attack, he realized that this man must be vanquished as soon as possible. The masked man claimed that unlike Yul, he could aid in completing missions and would share points and items. They just had to execute his orders for him to do that. As austere intentions filled his mind, the masked man claimed that they just had to accept. All they had to do was execute his every desire. But the detective began to charge up his gauntlets, before attacking with all his might, stating that the serpent should just raid a dungeon. But the masked villain managed to shield himself from the wind and claimed that he had already adapted to such offense. Yet both the spearman and the police officer seemed startled as something began to approach them from underground. Suddenly, multiple slime snakes began to rise from the ground, before engulfing both of them in a giant sphere of poison. But luckily, Haiju managed to create a barrier just in time to protect herself and the inspector. The serpent then stated that Seo and Haiju's abilities were rendered powerless against his own. With that, he decided to spare whoever's scream would bring him the most joy after being victims of his poison. The serpent then asserted that there was only one type of agonized scream he wanted to hear. With that, the barrier was shattered by the snakes. So Inspector Seo decided to cover Haiju and use himself as a shield against the venomous bites. The dragon warrior claimed to be of a higher level, but the police officer didn't want to hear any of it, as it was his responsibility to ensure her safety as a police officer and the eldest of the two. The serpent claimed that this scene displeased him. Yet he was about to express what he truly desired. A sudden blow of wind blew his poison away. This left the dragon, the bear, and even the serpent confused. As he sheathed his sword, he stated that he expected more from his student. Jack was disappointed to see Hiniju struggling against such a weak foe. Both Seo and Haiju were surprised to see the goblin swordsman. The serpent recognized him as one of the monsters who guarded the pillars on the last mission, which left him confused as to why he didn't vanish ever since. Jack wanted to teach the young one a lesson, but they were running short on time. An emergency notice popped in the system. A rumble could be heard near an immense pile of gold and what seemed to be an empty pig shell. Another golden deity that competes for the head of the herd spot has been discovered after reaching adolescence. With that, the city's mission was altered. The citizens were now able to choose which golden pig they would like to gift their treasures to, and the deity with the most riches would be crowned the winner. All were reading carefully as another notice popped up stating that those who chose the future winner would be rewarded handsomely, but those who chose the loser would receive none. The citizens began to blame the protagonist after seeing that the golden deity of the desert had a much more impressive wealth compared to the one in the city despite having only one participant. Even the serpent's underlings began to discuss how this all might be Yule's doing, when something surprised the masked man. The whole city joining forces to take down one villain was a very old play. Yet a simpleton that relies only on his epic item could never possibly fill that role, as stated by the protagonist arriving on the back of his griffin. The civilians began to talk about how Yule would never surrender himself and how he looked like an evil person upon seeing him on the scene. With that, one of the men proposed to head back to the city, yet another decided to argue that the serpent was there. Yet they didn't care about the small villain when facing the demon lord of greed's servant, who even made the serpent shake in anguish. With that, the masked man immediately attacked the protagonist. He unleashed a colossal venomous snake on Yule. Both Seo and Haiju were surprised to see the giant snake eating their friend. The serpent decided to execute the wielder of the book for ridiculing him. Yet Yule seemed unfazed by the situation, unlike his griffin. Suddenly, the magic beast caught the serpent's projectile with his beak. This confused the masked villain. When witnessing it eating his power, he was surprised to see the Emperor Griffin, who diets on venomous creatures, swallow the special poison bomb that he created to take down its master. Suddenly, Yule appeared right behind the villain. The serpent was startled when the book's wielder asked him if he knew why his poison was ineffective from behind his back. Yet Yule refused to tell him why and decided to let him search for the answer alone, before flicking him on the head and asking him to stop harassing innocents. Seo and Heniju were left shocked, and just like that, the serpent was defeated. After that, the protagonist claimed the golden deity of the desert as his own, and stated that anyone who tried to offer a treasure to his giant pig would be a victim of the demon greed lord on every mission. And with an evil face, he challenged the city to find a solution before the end of this mission, before flying off on his griffin. This left all shocked at how pitiful of an actor he was. Even Jack had to comfort him after such a pathetic performance. It was now sunset, and a gigantic tornado was spotted in the desert near the city. At the treasure hunt mission urgent meeting, the attendants were discussing how they should gather enough treasures in a week in order to beat the book wielder. Haiju asked the citizens to join forces with the rest of them. Seo affirmed that Yule was the city's greatest enemy, but they had other urgent matters to attend to. The inspector proposed to face the problem in the same way they did in their original world. Cooperation was the key. Haiju stated that it was teamwork that always allowed humanity to overcome its challenges. Today's main concerns were to vanquish the wielder of the book, finish the upcoming missions while trying to return to Earth. And with that, Haiju ignited her spear and requested the citizens' help, leaving them all on fire. A blonde person was left behind the bars. This person had the orb implanted in his hand, and great anger dwelling inside his mind. A new morning began to rise on the trapped city. A first mission guideline was procured by the Sig Union. Firstly, the lair referred to the habitat of all hostile monsters that didn't live underground. The layers were easy to deal with since the monsters could be spotted from a large distance. It didn't offer much to loot but could potentially contain a rare and valuable item. Secondly, there were the dungeons. Dungeons were defined as every biome that couldn't be discovered without entering them. This place offered the most valuable loot, but it was prohibited for someone to enter a dungeon alone, seeing how dangerous it was. It was recommended to seek the help of an experienced fighter of the army or the police before entering a dungeon. An old man was organizing the treasures before escorting the loot back to the city. With that, multiple loaded trucks made their way into the city, but suddenly a horde of flying monsters appeared from the skies. And so the adventurers tried to repel them until they could reach the city. The humans were almost home, where some other adventurers waited for them. With that, the humans in the city began to attack the monsters in order to protect the trucks. The third place was the Treasure Evaluation Center. The loot's value was estimated inside the Treasure Evaluation Center's walls while the forces of order protected the adventurers inside. An epic treasure called the Idol of the True God that was made after the deity himself and was also valued at 1,000 was discovered. The hunter was overjoyed by his precious discovery. Meanwhile, someone was writing numbers on a blank board. Uchoi was still far more wealthy than the city itself, even though they had conquered most of the jungle and the canyon. Only one place remained undiscovered, and that was the desert where the book wielder was hiding. The citizens had been avoiding such dangerous, mysterious areas until now, but now they had the power to explore it. The shiny hair was on the table. Sia was just informed that this hair was the replica of Yule they were detaining. His partner then stated that if Yule had talked about the desert's deity from the start, most people would try to avoid it, since they were all scared of him. Yet the book wielder decided to play the villain in order to force people to take action by letting them overcome their fear. That the angry inspector broke the table in two as he rejected his idea. At this rate, the mission's outcome wouldn't matter in the end, and the poor young man would always be seen as a villain. His partner stood there in silence, thinking about it all. He was starting to grasp how Yul Choi thought. The protagonist wasn't only trying to accomplish the current mission, but strategize for the rest of the game. The young man was aware that the rest of the city needed to work together and to be constantly evolving and leveling up. He probably had a plan to make them win their treasure hunt, pushing the civilians beyond working together to loot some pricey objects. A giant tablet of stone with scriptures on it was found in the jungle. The blonde woman examined it carefully. She thought of making a nice profit out of it as she discovered a new way to beat the treasure hunt. A great battle was occurring in the desert near the tornado. It was now the final day of the treasure hunt, and Detective Sia was facing a protagonist, Yul, who just blocked Sia's punch, and his golden deity amassed a fortune of 38,552,895. But our protagonist was surprised to find himself sent flying into the air. Sia stated that he would remain heavier than Yul, no matter his level. Once in the air, our protagonist was attacked from both sides by the serpent and the dragon warrior, who were part of the citizens whose pig amassed a fortune of 37,001,970. But the wielder of the book managed to swiftly evade all the attacks directed at him, and the race for the best deity ends in less than 25 minutes. Yul then pointed out how little time the city still had to beat him. He then called his opponents the allied forces of the city and stated that they needed to work harder against him. 4 days ago, Haiju was surprised by the serpent's true identity. The mighty villain turned out to be a level 24 teenager named Sunwon Kang. The arrogant boy wanted Haiju to leave him alone and stated that he would call her when needed, which angered the hero who was tasked with surveilling him. But just as the serpent was about to make his move, he was interrupted by something that flew right next to him. That was Haiju's spear, which was quicker than the villain's orb, separating him from the average person. The dragon warrior obtained that information from someone's gang, who quickly betrayed him, making him look like a bad leader. But the serpent didn't blame his traitorous underlings, who would lick his boot once again after he taught them a lesson. The high schooler claimed it to be their essence as humans. This made the hero call him a teenage edgelord. Someone's wishing orb, which was also an epic item, but the only reason he lost to the epic book's wielder is that the orb wasn't at full power yet. But once his strength reaches its zenith, even Yule would be no match for him. Henju grew worried when the serpent claimed that he would eventually rule the city. The villain was right, since the wielder of the demonic book was the only one responsible for his defeat. This made the dragon warrior think that the city should take precautions regarding this young man who hasn't unlocked his full power yet. At the Treasure Evaluation Center 4, 2 hunters were talking about how one of them experienced a dungeon for the first time. A little bit further, a police officer wanted to find a hunter for walking with a shed sword. Jayu was annoyed since she needed Discord in order to make a big profit out of her intel. That's where she decided to call someone saved as Miss Jackpot. Miss Jackpot turned out to be Haiju, who expressed how worried she was about her friend. But while the dragon warrior was talking on the phone, the villain was discreetly adjusting the settings of his power-hungry serpent's wishing orb. Jayu asked the Spear Maiden if she knew anyone who would be interested in buying information, but she just gathered all the important figures. The helmet wearer had a question before commencing the meeting. He wanted to know why the young villain was attending their meeting. There was no other than the man next to him that asked for his presence, since the high schooler was a talented individual. There was also a waste of talent in this times of need to ask Haiju to be his warden. But just as the inspector was angrily expressing his opinion, he quickly changed his tone after being interrupted by the level 1 Shulman Lee. According to the blonde girl's data, a golden deity could be eliminated before it became a full-grown adult. Despite Yule being an obstacle, there was still a chance for them to win, which is why someone's help was required. Just like he said, the city would eventually scream for him before proposing a deal to the rest of the table. Yule and Jack were sitting on a building's roof near the massive tornado. The swordsman wanted to know if his master needed more victims for the demon lord of greed. He noticed that Yule was still under demonic punishment, but the book wielder stated that he wanted the people to get as much treasure as possible since he found a solution for the victims. This time, the protagonist targeted those who were about to enter a lethal dungeon and those who were about to stumble upon a cursed item. Yule claimed that he had to put some individuals into isolation for this mission, which left the swordsman intrigued. With that, someone came to them. A team composed of a lieutenant, the inspector, the high schooler, and the spear maiden was getting close to him. There was also a truck escorting soldiers meant to help them fight Yule. Jack wanted to face them, but the wielder of the book stopped him, as it wasn't his time to take action since he should be sending his weakest servant to battle first. A giant shadow was above the military trucks. The Emperor Griffin attacked the allied forces of the city. Both Seo and Heiju were surprised to see poison roaming around them. The serpent ordered them to leave. The young man decided to distract their first foe. This behavior greatly annoyed his two teammates, who immediately attacked the beast from above. Meanwhile, the lieutenant ordered the units to find a secure spot and use their weapons to help the heroes. The soldiers immediately executed the orders. Meanwhile, the serpent, who didn't want to fight Yule's minion, stayed hidden since the griffin wasn't his goal. He wanted to outplay those who tried to manipulate him into killing the golden deity of the desert. The gray-haired man observed from afar. He assumed that the book wielder wasn't open to the negotiation he recommended to the team. With that, he and his men began to make their move. The operation to eliminate the golden deity of the desert was just a distraction. The mission could be cleared by slaughtering the giant pig, but it was hopelessly out of reach. In reality, they planned to go to the desert and loot as much as possible. Therefore, they must deploy as many units as possible to loot the place, since they only had time for one trip. Which is why they had to distract the serpent with the task of killing the desert deity, since it would be too risky to leave him in a weakened city. The car suddenly stopped. The man was shocked at what he'd seen. He and his men stumbled upon a ruined city from Earth in the middle of the desert. The soldiers observed the place in silence. This led him to think that they weren't the only city trapped in this game. Iggy wasn't expecting to see his theory come true in such a way. This city was ruined by its citizens killing each other, not by some outside monstrosity. The place was filled with treasure. The corpses began to decompose a year ago. This led the soldier to think that this city had years to complete this mission despite them having much less time. But then he was shocked when the man with the hat theorized that both cities started the challenge at the same time, but the flow of time moved differently for each city. There was no way to prove it, but if this turned out to be true, it meant that the players behind this game could control even time. Claws began to slash. Seal was face to beak with the Emperor Griffin. The inspector attacked the beast with a well-chained series of punches, greatly damaging the great beast, when suddenly something startled it. Kanju, who was ready to strike it down, managed to sneak her way onto its back. She apologized to the griffin since they had no choice but to win, before using her power to burn the poor beast. Jack was left impressed. Seo and Hiju's main weapons were some of the finest in the game, which also gave additional stat points while granting the user great firepower, which explains why those two were impressive from the beginning. But their attack range was too large, making them a danger to anyone near them. Which is why Yule forced them into joining forces in order to learn to control their powers. But training them would only be possible alongside an experienced party of fighters who were used to working together. The griffin was now defeated, which is why the inspector and the dragon warrior were surprised to feel it move behind their backs. It was Yule carrying the creature and praising them for completing the first stage. Sia wanted this whole masquerade to end and stated that he wasn't here to slaughter the pig of the desert. Yule was surprised when the man claimed to be coming to rescue him. Seeing that man working to get him back to the city put a smile on the protagonist's face. Yule then challenged Seo to put him under arrest, before flying away, leaving him and Haiju alone on the scene, when suddenly something caught her attention. She got in front of the inspector, trying to defend him. Gaiju had to repel a powerful attack. She was successfully able to protect all her allies. Jack stated that his student was the only one to repel his attack. This made him realize that he had to do his best to restrain himself before accidentally killing one of them. The lieutenant recognized him as the strongest out of the three-pillared guardians during the last mission. It took great numbers and countless hours to take down the weakened pillars. This made the man wonder if they could face the goblin swordmaster with such a small unit, especially after the serpent disappeared. Meanwhile, at the Griffin Emperor's nest in the canyon sector, Yule was praising his weakest minion and recommended him to rest well as it healed. He then apologized to the creature, who could quickly regenerate, for sacrificing it like a mere pawn. As an apology, Yule used the legendary Tool Weather Orb that would change the weather in a small area for one time. The wielder of the book summoned a thunderstorm in order to protect the griffin's nest until the end of this mission. With that, he headed back at an impressive speed. On the way, he remembered the inspector's kind words. He expected the city's strongest fighter to come and face him, but was surprised by his good intentions. Yule could predict others' actions, but not what was on their minds. Smoke began to rise in the sky. Only Seo and Haiju were still standing in front of the goblin sword master. The inspector couldn't think of a way to win against that Jack, who looked invulnerable. Haiju begged her master to grant them access, but Jack didn't want them to earn their pass with a conversation, but with a fight. The lieutenant, who turned out to be alive, proposed to retreat. They still had some time ahead of them, so they should use it to strategize since the goblin only counterattacked. Jack was standing on the top of a ruined building. When Yule arrived, the sword master stated that Jaeong Won thought wisely. Meanwhile, inside a military tent, the three of them were analyzing their opponents. A party needed strategic thinking in order to thrive since strength alone wasn't enough. Yule wanted to take advantage of the mission in order to make them more experienced in beating dungeons. It is also crucial to make multiple and diverse groups work together, to avoid seeing a single entity rising to power alone. As for the serpent, the protagonist decided to keep an eye on him for the moment. After all, he was just a boy becoming a man. Someone stated that the sandstorm in front of him made Seo look powerless. He planned to eliminate the golden deity of the desert, while the others were distracting its protector after passing through the sandstorm. Meanwhile, back in the city, the young man was surprised by the result he got and asked the inspector how he figured it out. The man stated that Yule will never follow the mission's rules but use them to earn as much as possible. This made the man wonder what he would do in their place, which is how he found out how to successfully increase the value of a treasure before offering it. With that, the city had to amass greater wealth than the desert deity, or hope that the sent unit eliminates it first, making the man wonder what way Yule chose for the city to win. The operating and organizing of the city treasures was proceeding like clockwork. A policeman and a soldier were worried about the sandstorm in the desert sector that would slow down the upcoming trucks and their lack of equipment, but the inspector resolved them quickly. With that, they decided to quickly execute their orders. Yet they were both surprised to find themselves calling him boss. Inspector C was asked about his partner. Haiju assumed that he must be powerful since his partner left him to lead the citizens, which Seo confirmed. But Dusik was more known as resourceful. Yet that's what makes him a threat. Seo wouldn't have left him unsupervised if it weren't for the current situation. He thought of how he had no other choice as he swallowed his meal in one go, surprising Haiju. The serpent was going all out, but he was still being overpowered. He was vanquished and launched far by the enormous sandstorm. This left the boy confused since the level of his wishing orb didn't get any higher after use like it should have. Yule had his book open. He thought of how the serpent was wasting the chance he offered him. In order to master his wishing orb, the young boy had to fight a stronger foe every time. He was expected to see his poison being useless against elite monsters since he was only using it on weak monsters and humans while hiding. Yol decided not to tell him that he would have progressed further if he fought alongside the city's heroes. Yet the protagonist found the immature serpent to be currently a good asset. Someone was traveling at an incredible speed. There was Jack, who landed on the roof of a building, when suddenly the structure was blown up under his feet. The soldier gave Seo the green light. The detective put all his power into his punch. And with the swords when blinded, the soldiers were free to make the bullets rain. They then had to take cover as the missile entered the eye of the tornado. This resulted in a huge explosion. One of the soldiers decided to celebrate early, but the other one shut him down since it brings misfortune. Hiju was standing in the rubble. Her master used her as a shield and stated that this attack wasn't enough to penetrate his barrier. The lieutenant realized that they needed more power. Yet the goblin was impressed and decided to let them pass. He stated that they had learned to fight in this world. Jack then turned to his disciple and stated that teamwork was one of the many ways to make one more powerful. The lieutenant was still impressed that these two were in a story of their own as the master stated that he expected more of his disciple. With that, the allied forces of the city went on their way. Jack also walked away with a smile on his face. This made the man with the glasses wonder if the enemy was training or testing them, making him wonder what would have happened if he wasn't pleased with their performance. He then ordered his forces to stay vigilant since the wielder of the book was expecting them. The allied forces were discussing a way to get past the tornado. But the detective seemed to have an idea. With that, he decided to try something. In that moment, he went to his limits. In order to open up a pass through the tornado, everyone was surprised by this impressive feat, but all were startled when someone stated that wearing these gauntlets didn't grant such power. According to Yule, this meant that Punbake started to respect the detective. Keiju was surprised to see him, when suddenly she and the detective mysteriously disappeared. It was Yule's doing to declare the start of the final act after using the heroic tool-free warp tickets, which allowed him to teleport someone to a certain place. This tool can forcibly teleport a citizen under the condition that he wasn't stronger than the user. Haiju and Seo assumed that they were teleported far from the battle, when suddenly someone approached them from behind. It was the serpent, who was impressed that they survived the griffin. Both looked at the villain in silence, yet the serpent found something odd about them. He wondered how these two changed so much within a day. Haiju wanted to know if Yule also teleported him here, but he claimed to have woken up here, making him wonder if Yule really didn't. The serpent assumed that he sent them away in fear that they might slay his giant pig, but the protagonist affirmed that it wasn't his intention. Yule claimed that the final clash had always been hosted in a special place. The serpent started to mock him for having such an idea. Yule dodged his attack and was surprised to see him knowledgeable about the matter. But the young man claimed to have heard it from those he harassed. The more you get the target, the more it gets involved in the role and performs it perfectly, which is why the boy remembers it well. Now Yule was sure that the serpent was the perfect antagonist. The soldiers lost contact with the rest of the team and were now short on ammo. Even though they successfully got the high schooler out of the city, they were still unsure if the citizens would gather enough points in time. This led them to resume the operation by finding the dragon warrior first, since the race would end in 2 days. They only had time to proceed with the current strategy without coming up with new ones. Haiju and Yule clashed together, yet the hero wanted to negotiate. The protagonist then stated that his pride would cause his downfall, like every other villain. Battle stated that everyone here could slay the deity in one attack since it was full of health, with no defense. And with an evil laugh, he decided to let the first one to hit him pass and kill his pig. But while the serpent was getting into the set mood, Seo and Haiju were impressed by how he became even worse as an actor. The little boy clearly understood the mission, but his bloodlust wouldn't be satisfied by one hit. With that, he launched an attack that targeted Yule from all directions. But with the swing of a sword, the protagonist repelled the poison, before hitting the teenager on the forehead. The serpent was defeated once again by getting hit on the forehead a second time. With that, Yule asked Seo and Haiju about their next move. There was no room for argument. Although they opposed the serpent, the bear and the dragon warrior decided to confront the wielder of the book. The trap was loaded up. The soldier stated that since the cars were full, there was no place for the adventurers. So he told the old man to return home with the guards and the non-fighters. He and the rest would carry the rest of the loot on foot, meaning that midway after delivering the treasures would be a time saver. The soldier looked back one last time. He gazed at the ruined city and paid his respects to its fallen citizens. Back to the fight, Yule swiftly dodged Hiju's flames when Seo decided to take him by surprise, but the book wielder suddenly disappeared. The anti-hero reminded them that he was stronger than his monster friend, stating that they should do better than that. Despite not taking them seriously, Yule's air shoes made him unpredictable. Keiju was trying to remember the goblins while some would try to get her attention. This made Guan yell in her ear via earpiece. She apologized, stating that she was too busy to respond, but the lieutenant told her that it's fine since they were able to find them. Suddenly, the communication was disrupted. The call was ended, so Hiju decided to call Guan back before seeing a message on her phone. It came from the man with the helmet stating that the girl should just listen when we called her back. The lieutenant wanted to talk about Yule's speech about the golden deity. According to him, those words were clues to finish the mission. This meant that they were all victims of the Greed Lord, which made Hiju grow confused, but Guan was more interested in a full report of the battlefield. He wrote everything down. Guan ended the call after asking the girl to buy some time while he came up with a strategy, but Hiju was already worried about keeping up with him, so she decided not to give it a thought and dove into the battle instead. It was now sunset. The serpent had finally woken up, but to his surprise, his allies were all knocked down, making him laugh seeing how predictable the outcome was. With that, he went to confront Yule again. The protagonist stated that the serpent's weapon was abandoned by the power-hungry serpent, which made having it increase its power the most crucial part. But using it carelessly would end up corrupting the teenager. But the serpent didn't want to hear any of it as he attacked the anti-hero. The villain was now warned but was more interested in defeating him. Someone was trying to communicate with the spearman. The lieutenant finally came up with a plan. By night, the golden deity of the city had almost amassed a wealth of 16 million. It was a long night for those who tried to come back from the desert on foot, But finally, a new dawn had risen on them. The old man finally came to pick them up. With that, the city had almost got 27 million in treasure, with 116,554 participants. It was now the final day of the treasure hunt. The golden deity of the desert had amassed 38,552,895, surpassing the cities by 1.5 million. The serpent was irritated by the situation and was eager to level up at the end of this mission. Seo got a sudden message when 21 minutes were left. With that, he told the spear maiden to get in position. It was now time for the final move. Yul swiftly escaped the rising tornado, but the detective wasn't done just yet. It was becoming more difficult for the book wielder to evade them. With the pain coming back, the protagonist was losing control over his power. With that, the serpent decided to go for the kill. But he was surprised to see the detective dashing out of the battlefield, and was even more shocked when the soldier gave the signal. The man was startled by the tall seal landing right in front of him. He advised the soldier to hold on since they were about to depart. The confused teenager jumped in their direction, before creating a claw made of poison that targeted the boat. The soldier wanted to see if they had escaped Yule, so Seo advised him to keep his eyes on the road. They were now short on time and were down to their last 15 minutes. Yule's sword slashed through the tornado. He wanted to chase them down, but Haiju, who was heavily consuming recovery potions, stood behind to make sure he didn't follow them. She reminded Yule how he revealed to her the Fang's secret power. It was true that she could use prominence, but there were conditions. Haiju stated that she only had to stab herself with the Fang if full health unleashes full power. But Yul tried to warn her that the most vital condition was missing and what could happen to her. But Haiju was ready to stab herself. Trying to unleash this power now would result in her death. Haiju's spear is a weapon containing the power of the Fire King, allowing the user to use its abilities and summon the Dragon of the Sun prominence once all the conditions are met. But this power could only be used at dawn or sunset. Yul knew that Haiju was aware of the requirement, but she stated that it was the lieutenant's idea. The man stated that it's impossible to predict Yul's strategy, but he wasn't invincible, since it was easy to guess what type of soul he had. With that, Yul admitted defeat. He could chase them down, but it wasn't necessary anymore since his goals were all achieved. 7 minutes remained and they were getting ready to engage the enemy. Seo was pushing the boat at an incredible speed. Once again, the man was lifting the wind, creating an opening for the others to enter the storm. But the detective was surprised to see the serpent emerging from behind with a crazy laugh. His snake almost hit the soldiers in his way. The villain was trying to seize the golden deity of the desert. He wanted the pig to stop struggling. With that, the serpent extracted the golden deity from the eye of the tornado. Wong and his squad attacked with their rifles. At the same time, equipment was being upgraded. The armor was now tailored and ready to be offered to the giant pig. Less than 5 minutes remained and the lieutenant decided to use a grenade, further damaging the golden deity of the desert. At the same time, a shield with a ridiculous design was refused by the golden deity of the city as the child crafted something. His creation was finished, yet he thought of it as unworthy and ugly. But his mood quickly brightened up when it started to glow. Only 1 minute and 35 seconds were left. Yul decided to ask his friend for a favor. He predicted that the citizens would soon turn on each other and plunge themselves into chaos, since this was the essence of humanity. This shocked Haiju. The time was almost up. All were doing their best when something began to happen with the golden deity. 4 seconds remained. Jayu was admiring the people as they worked as 2 seconds were left. It looked like the giant pig was about to explode, when it suddenly became relieved at the end of the race, finishing the mission. The golden deity of the city had won the race as the serpent laughed like a maniac on top of the deity's corpse. He assumed that he was going to level up, but to his surprise, all his points were stolen by the Greed Lord. All those who were outside the city were being teleported back. Seo and Guang congratulated each other and agreed to have a drink together later on. With that, they were teleported back to the city. The reward points of the citizens were doubled. Haiju landed in the city, confused, wondering where Yul was. As for the high scores, Jiyu Kang took 3rd place with 33,442 points, just behind Gyeong Seon, who scored 45,455 points. As for number 1, it was no other than Wong Park with 324,432 points. The citizens began to toss the old man in the air out of joy. At the humble top scorer stated that it was Haiju and her treasures that deserved all the credit. Yet he decided to celebrate his success by inviting everyone to a dinner that he would pay for, earning him even more cheers. The sun shined on the celebrated city. The lieutenant received a notification. He was informed that all the members of his party were rewarded with the golden deity equipment 12-faced dice for killing the rival deity. increasing the chances of getting heroic items. Wong found the golden deity's gifts very generous, even if their reward would ultimately be decided by fortune. The golden pig also rewarded the city. Until their next mission, it would be earning a tenth more experience points than usual. With that, the golden deity departed happily from the city. They now had a day until the next mission, and Yule was quite satisfied with this outcome. The protagonist managed to stop the Green Lord's punishment after being down to a tenth of his health, as Jack stated that the city considered them enemies, but Yule denied it. The swordsman quietly mocked him as his master declared himself the sea's greatest catastrophe. Yule was happy that the citizens were able to overcome this challenge on their own. It would now take an amazing disaster to break the city's morale. But when Jack stated that Yule guided them to victory, he realized that his master was lost in his own thoughts. The city had all the points it required on top of being energetic. A new city number 8 would be rising after this break between turns. A crowd was gathering. Many citizens were trying to offer their services to one park. But the humble top scorer affirmed that the true hero was Haiju, who his company just helped. This left him confused when two blushing men stated that they wanted to work for him for this reason. The citizens saw the Spear Maiden as an angel of the flames who kept fighting for them despite becoming a victim of the Green Lord and the most popular warrior in the city. This made the two men obsessed with working with the Dragon Warrior. Haiju observed the crowd in silence. This made her remember Yule's words, and how he wanted her to be a ray of hope in the upcoming dark times. Haiju would become a beacon of hope for the city at the right time. Finally, she decided to approach the crowd. She denied being the special someone they referred to. The Akiniju invited them to fight with her by forming a guild. In the Middle Ages, guilds referred to groups of artisans or merchants in Europe. But in gaming, a guild is formed by individuals who share the same goal. This made the detective compare them to social clubs. Ducey confirmed and stated that there were many types of guilds, so Sue asked if there was a guild option in the system. The guild option had always been part of the system, but none were created yet since no one could afford to pay 100,000 points, which resulted in the creation of 3 official guilds and some others that remain unregistered. The first and most popular guild, which focuses on missions and keeping the city safe, is the Delanix Guild with Haiju as guild master and One Park as deputy. At first, the members wanted to call it the Haiju Guild, but their guild master was so embarrassed that they decided to name it after her most relished flower instead. Since Detective CO trusted the Flame Angel, he assumed that her people wouldn't cause any trouble. The second guild, which strived based on the colonel's leadership and the lieutenant's abilities on the field, was the Armed Forces of City Number 8, also known as Armed Forces. CO, who acknowledged the two men, could expect only the best for their guild. And as for the third guild, the detective was shocked after hearing about the Serpent Guild, also known as the Kingdom Guild. Although defeated, the serpent with his wishing orb drew a lot of people who were mostly greedy criminals into his guild with the one goal of ruling the city after slaying its greatest enemy. Seer stated that they needed to gain power in order to beat the egotistic serpent, who will stay hidden until he can kill the wielder of the book. Yet the police were still unable to create their own guild since they were occupied with catching outlaws and protecting the city. If nothing is done, the police would become powerless. Seo looked through the window and asked Duzik if this was his solution. Many men greeted them in a single voice. They all expressed their desires to work under Duzik by becoming police officers. This made the detective curious about his partner's activity while he was in the desert. Duzik then affirmed that he wasn't gathering troops in order to overthrow the current police. So Seo thanked him as a response for gathering all his followers in one place. The tension had risen once again between the fox and the bear as an officer tried to get their attention. He stated that they spotted something strange while listing the most recent victims of the Greed Lord. Seo decided to take a closer look. Most of the victims were registered as criminals back in their world. This made Duzik realize why the serpent was the only villain that showed himself in the city, making him state once again how powerless the police forces currently were, making his partner burst in anger and finally accept to hire his followers. The detective then walked out, giving his partner the middle finger, insisting on the new recruits following the police protocol. The serpent wasn't the only troublemaker scared of Yule. This would take a long-term plan, which the fox excels at. Papers were dispersed into the air. They were all flyers inviting the people to join the armed forces and inviting them back to the military. The colonel was confused as no one wanted to be a part of their guild. That was due to the word re-enlist that scared people, according to Wong. But on the other hand, this also meant that only serious adventurers were applying despite being only a few. It seemed like the lieutenant had something to tell his superior. The guild was almost out of fuel and ammo. Their food was also getting rare despite having electricity, which meant that they would soon have to rely on the available items and return to a life that lacked technology. but it was unlikely for the citizens to complain with their currently raised morale. The colonel then threw something on the table, calling it an asset. Those were archives that belonged to city number 4. The citizens of the ruined city of the desert left records behind before going extinct, and these notebooks are summaries of their adventures. By combining their knowledge with the experience of city number 8, a new mission manual should see the day. Meanwhile, Yule was lost in his thoughts. The person next to him stated that he looked pretty happy, which he confirmed. Yule was startled to see Jayu sitting next to him. She then offered him some chips while stating that Yule's action allowed her to earn some points. Jayu then asked him if he was going to start his own guild, which he denied since all the members would end up as victims of the Greed Lord. She then leaned even closer to him and asked him to promise to make her his first recruit if he ever forms a guild. With that, she suddenly stood up, leaving the city's greatest villain intimidated. Her hook was firmly planted. Jayu offered her help to Yule. She then proposed to become a victim of the Greed Lord. Before jumping off the tall tower, Jayu was a strange girl. She left him a bag of chips. Yule started to think about how the Demon Lord's punishment and the victims of the Greed Lord were becoming obstacles in accomplishing missions. Yule started to confront Krishna on this mission while making the mission easier for the citizens. The Greed Lord didn't receive any reward since Yule didn't get any points by betting on the losing golden deity. This was a way to warn the Demon Lord not to stay in between Yule and his goals. And so the protagonist decided to repeat the same strategy until the entity responds back. He felt that he would get his answer soon based on his title of Greed Lord. Krishna was fully aware that Yule could get him what he wants, when suddenly something caught the protagonist's attention. He was now in a vast white empty room. In that room was a mysterious person surrounded by flying books and seemed familiar to our anti-hero. Yule quickly charged with his sword at the man after recognizing him as the Demon Lord of Greed. But to his surprise, he was suddenly sitting in a chair. The entity was now behind him, holding a plate full of fruit. Yule tried to strike the book's owner once again, but he was magically back in the chair with a new, more formal outfit in front of the table. Yule was suddenly having a tea party with the Demon Lord of Greed. Krishna felt different from all the other Demon Lords. For the first time, Yule felt powerless as he faced Krishna, the Demon Lord of Ultimate Greed. The entity was quietly sipping tea. Yule decided to keep a cool head since the Demon Lord didn't seem to bear any hostile intention, and so he decided to converse with him, but he was left surprised after opening his mouth. Yule realized that he was unable to talk when Krishna claimed to have answered his call out of curiosity. The Greed Lord then gave him a choice between becoming someone crucial to him or staying someone interesting. Yule thought for a short while. He had cracked a smug smile upon hearing that Krishna required something. So the entity advised him not to get over his head since he could easily replace him, but not the other way around. This made the protagonist assume that the Demon Lord could hear his thoughts. Yule was now confronted with the choice of remaining curio or walking a more promising path by becoming someone the Demon Lord needed. The presented books were identical but would morph in order to adapt to his choice. Yule wanted to know if walking this new path would put an end to the victims of the Greed Lord and the punishment of the Demon Lord. But Krishna affirmed that he was only offering him to become someone that was crucial to him, and Yule might not be able to fulfill his new task. The protagonist remained silent. Yule then stated that those needs would put pressure on him. But this is why he picked Krishna's curiosity from the start, since the price would be worth the opportunity. By accepting this new mission, Yule would be able to alter the destiny of all captured cities. This left the anti-hero shocked. The city had now reached level 3. It was able to jump 2 levels when its inhabitants started to use their points. The player was selecting his reward as his city was partially restored and making Jayi realize that the player had more options than what the dice offered. This entity barely acted up until now, yet the player of city number 4 caused their downfall. This meant that the player of city number 8 was just being lazy and letting events occur or simply lacked interest in the city. The player chose to summon an NPC known as the Summon Helper, whose look and equipment were randomly generated. The citizens were advised to be cautious around it since it would treat its attacker as a hostile threat. Seeing how high her attributes and level were, some of those pleased by her appearance began to run away. Jayu compared this new ally to a powerful village guard, but since the player made his choice, it meant that he was active. Or perhaps he decided to play with more dedication. The player received a notification. After detailed analysis, it turned out that Yule was a perfectly designed unit, but since the presence of an error was still possible, the player had to choose between 3 choices. This made the player opt for the invasive analysis. Yet this option proved to be a threat to Yule's life. Finally, the giant hand made up its mind. Yule was plunged into a deep slumber. The protagonist wondered if Krishna meant other cities when referring to units. The demon lord confirmed as Yule realized that he was able to talk once again. This was unexpected since the owner of the book had the power to impact all the game. Krishna was far more powerful than the other demon lords. It was now time for Yule to choose. The protagonist was more interested in knowing the reason behind Krishna being summoned, but the entity denied being invoked. Krishna affirmed that he wanted to steal everything that belonged to the player down to their last possession, making the human realize how much the demon loathed these entities. Yulm now had to choose. He recalled how other demon lords regarded the players as deities who invoked them as pawns for the sake of the mission. With that being said, the protagonist reached for one of the two books. This put a smile on Krishna's face. As he faded away, he stated that his chosen one chose the right and most obvious path. Yul was left shocked when he learned that he would forget about this encounter since it should stay a secret for now, leaving the man disappointed and unsatisfied. Krishna then stated that it was crucial to keep things as they are for now as Yul began to fall. The protagonist began to wake up. He assumed that he had just given in to slumber. Yul sighed in disappointment, thinking that the demon lord didn't answer his call. Krishna stated that the book would guide the protagonist. The sun began to set on the city. Someone was running as fast as they could. It looked like Jayu was in a hurry. She wanted to know if she was able to shake her pursuers off. When suddenly a hand was slammed on the wall, Jayu felt uneasy as this person's voice was full of love. Hanju tracked her friend down in order to invite her into her guild. Jayu denied and told the Angel of Flame to stop acting so childishly. This adventurer works solo, and so she advised the Spear Maiden to invite someone else. Heiju, with her blazing hair, then threw herself on her friend, comparing her to a little kitten that she would keep by her side. And Sir Heiju kept insisting on Jiyu. The armed forces were training for battle. They should use the recovery function that cost 10 points after half an hour if they weren't harmed. But they should also use it for the others' sake in order to restore their stamina. Not only does it restore the body, it also allows it to perform at its peak as if the body slept for a full night. This particular function incredibly increased one's work ethic. Recovery allowed people to fully use the 24 hours ahead of them while working tirelessly. Yule was training with Jack. The master swordsman corrected his friend's stance. As for the serpent, he ordered his servants to amuse him with a bloody riot since 10 points could bring them back to their full health. Someone promised to make the strongest of his subordinates his second in command. This recovery function that could replace sleep would be a key factor to survive the next mission. That being said, the player threw the dice once again as a new turn arrived. The dice landed on 4. City number 8 was now on the Cannon Tower Square. Since this challenge was called Joint Mission, how did you assume that it would require the citizens to work together? Hyul's book started to act oddly as the system looked for a partner for the city. The system would randomly teleport 1, 2, or 3 cities that landed on a similar square. With that, city number 17 had appeared. Haiju assumed that this city, whose population is most likely alive, must have also been invoked into this game. City number 17 didn't look like Earthlands at all, but if it were, its inhabitants must have been through a lot. The dark night of this mysterious game piece gazed into ours. City number 8 and city number 17 were now face to face. The map began to generate, and just like that, the two cities were now connected. The map was almost empty, with just a small cannon in the middle. This mission's difficulty is determined by the player's accumulated sum of dice rolls. The cannon tower's difficulty was set to 11. Suddenly, something began to rise from under the small cannon. With that, the cannon tower that randomly targeted the cities was in place. The mission would be considered complete once the time is up or the cannon tower conquered. You'll count in 11 floors with 1 for each difficulty. The duration was also determined by the dice rolls, and it turned out to be a total week. With that, the cannon tower began to move. The cannons were now pointed at the cities, and opened fire as soon as the mission began. With that, cannonballs began to rain on city number 8. Hadiju and Sia went to intercept the massive projectiles. The Spear Maiden tried to destroy the first one, but the cannonball was almost indestructible. Haiju failed to incinerate the first cannonball. The detective advised her to be careful, and if the cannonballs were indestructible, they only had to ensure everyone's safety by redirecting their course. The cannonballs caused great destruction upon impact. Feiju was worried about the city, but Sia assured her that its inhabitants' well-being was more important. But Dusik disagreed, since the mission's goal was to protect the city and not the citizens. With a tenth of the city's health gone, Yol realized that they would lose the game if the city got ravaged. So the wielder of the book decided to observe. He wanted to analyze city number 17's power. Its inhabitants began to mumble. It looked like its citizens were happily praying. They were worshipping their player as a deity. With that, the citizens of city number 17 asked for her player's protection. Yol couldn't believe his eyes. A spell called Hardened City created a shield to protect city number 17. With that, their city kept most of its health. The colonel recognized the card as one of those mentioned by the fallen city's archives. This meant that the players could either roll a dice or use a card to intervene in the game. But seeing them in reality was just a reminder of how they were just pawns in a bigger game. The small cannon at the top of the tower began to move. The ultimate cannon selected the city of the protagonist as its target, but it would take an hour for it to finally strike. Since the cannons stopped their ravage, the military of city number 8 decided to get closer to the tower. But unidentified objects seemed to be moving in front of them. Smaller towers began to rise from the ground, and so they decided to accelerate to evade this trap. With that, the vehicles did their best in order to evade the incoming bullets. The lieutenant lost 2 vehicles, with 1 man injured yet willing to keep the fight. So the soldiers told their superior to keep going while they took care of the trap. Wong ordered them to come back alive no matter what. He realized why the map only contained 1 structure. The map had the ability to shape-shift and create constructs and monsters if needed. The driver stated that the Angel of Flame should have been with them, but his superior denied it. Putting Harijo on a fence would leave the city defenseless, which is why she and the detective would remain inside the city for the whole mission. The soldiers needed to study the tower in order to come up with a plan, but just as he claimed that they should join forces with city number 17, the lieutenant noticed the serpent flipping him off from the window. Wong then noticed the villain on top of a red speeding sports car while talking about making a good first impression. The serpent and his guild rushed headfirst into the obstacles, and so the masked man decided to use his powers to clear the way. With that, he used his venom to destroy the many towers. The soldiers observed as the young maniac advanced ahead of them with his crazy laugh. Wong hoped that this immaturity wouldn't lead to conflict with the other city. 47 minutes and 30 seconds remained before the ultimate cannon struck city number 8. Cannonballs were once again launched into the sky. Each cannon of the tower had a cooldown of its own, and the Kingdom Guild was already inside the tower, when suddenly someone surprised the soldiers from the back. This person assumed that city number 8 was still a first generation based on its design and its citizens' outfits. This intrigued the lieutenant. The mysterious mate was a level 62 elite citizen who introduced himself as Robel von Lexus. Robel was the head of his house who had been called by the Divine, and in order to protect his city, asked the lieutenant to form an alliance. Yet before forming an alliance with this medieval city, Wong found it necessary to inform Robel that he represented a guild called the Armed Forces of City Number 8 and not the city itself. The knight then understood that City Number 8 had yet to unite itself, just like his city in the past. With that, von Lexus decided to reschedule their alliance but asked the lieutenant to deliver a message to his city. Robel called on a Pacific Pact where neither of the cities would behave violently, and the aggressor's punishment would also be chosen by the attacked city, meaning that it would be possible to kill in order to defend. Robel clarified that he only proposed this pact in order to protect his city, and so he offered a manual for clearing out his mission to the other party as a symbol of goodwill. Robel stated that the cannon tower was the first mission that his city cleared. This meant that his city was able to go through the same square multiple times. With that, he gave the unspoken order to his soldiers. Wong thanked the knight for his kindness and offered to give intel on those who would be an asset and those who may pose a problem. Robel was satisfied with this first interaction and proposed to schedule a meeting at the same time tomorrow. The curious lieutenant was intrigued since the knight wasn't interested in scouting the tower, but he assured him that it was impossible to force the entrance. It was useless to try to open it by force since it required a special ritual. The closed door was frustrating the serpent, and therefore they needed to make some preparations first, since city number 8 wasn't blessed with the one's protection. Yul was surprised to learn that city number 17 had been in play for a century and a half. Jack was intrigued since Yul was sitting on the side. The anti-hero was making himself difficult to obtain. The book's power was activated. Seeing this made Yul smile. He was tasked with offering an object from the world in exchange for sparing 100 victims of the Green Lord. Yul was intrigued by the odd side quest and was unsatisfied with the proposed reward. This task was a personal request of the Demon Lord. Yul assumed that Krishna, whom he pictured as a hideous monster, would try to meet him in person. Suddenly, the anti-hero slapped his own face. He was aware that the task ahead would be difficult, and he was still happy that Krishna responded to his call. With that, he decided to fulfill his demand. Yul was sure he would meet the Demon Lord one day by keeping the same approach, and if not, he would force him to manifest. The citizens felt alarmed as they saw their greatest threat moving inside the city. Everyone was in an alert state. Suddenly, the NPCs started to act oddly. Yul was targeted as the object of invasive analysis. The time was up, and with the ultimate cannon activated, Kuiju jumped headfirst in front of the attack in order to stop the blast. And so the Angel of Flames clashed with the immense cannonball. Haiju then remembered how her master advised her to use her power with modesty. At this time, she would need to use all her strength to protect the city. Sia was rendered powerless in this situation. Yul decided to use Taflum, the legendary thrown weapon that was said to have pierced the eye of the demon god. The item could be used 10 times per mission, but it could become more powerful by using fewer projectiles. Yul only needed one throw for this mission in order to pierce the giant cannonball, spending all Taflum throws for this mission in one go. The giant cannonball began to fissure, before leaving a titanic explosion behind. Seo congratulated Hiju, but the girl affirmed that it wasn't her doing, meaning that the anti-hero intervened once again. The explosion was so powerful that the Spear Maiden realized that they couldn't possibly counter this attack by themselves. The ultimate cannon suddenly began to rotate. It would be attacking city number 17 in an hour from now. After the use of the ultimate cannon, the map would start to change. The once plain surface was now covered in solid walls that the soldiers could use to protect themselves. The lieutenant began to grasp how the map works. After reviewing the data provided by their new ally, Wong could come up with a strategy. With that, he ordered his men to regroup and get into the vehicles. But the engine was destroyed by the rising walls. The jealous man wished to ride horses like the forces of city number 17. A red streak appeared in the sky. The defense towers were easily taken down by Yul's sword. Yul arrived at the right place according to the book. The protagonist had to take a 16 square feet section from the ground beneath him. He was given specific and detailed instructions on how to cut it. Yul would have to finally place the design piece on his book. Suddenly, the piece of ground disappeared. With that, the protagonist received his small reward. But while he was left intrigued, the carved piece arrived and the demon lords hanged. Krishna then crushed his received gift. He seemed satisfied. The powerful demonic entity was now in possession of a fraction of the key that holds great havoc. And so he decided to protect his worthy servant until his services were no longer needed. Suddenly, the NPC appeared behind Lyle to do the executive analysis. Its presence outside the city intrigued the anti-hero. Suddenly, the NPC attacked Yul, who assumed that it must be malfunctioning. That the protagonist felt alarmed when it was regulated to match his strength and suddenly became level 600. And for the first time in a long while, Yul began to bleed. The NPC began the physical checkup, the first part of the invasive analysis. Yul was shocked to see its incredible rise in level. With that, Yul and the NPC entered the quarantine zone. He desperately tried to fight back, trying his best to escape the quarantine zone. But the NPC gripped his leg just before he could reach the exit, stating that he was forbidden from taking part in the mission. Yul would remain detained until the end of the invasive analysis. This analysis intrigued the protagonist. Yul was suspected of being a defect in the system or a hacker for acquiring such power with such a low level. The anti-hero grabbed the flying book and summarized what the NPC just said, and in a burst of anger blamed it on the demon lord's book given to him by the system while throwing it at the NPC. Yul would now be tested and would be considered normal if he managed to pass, but would be immediately terminated in case of failure. This deaf ear turned to him by the game's developers made him compare them to those present in his home world. Everything was prepared, and with that, the new guild of adventurers called the Raiders went on their way. Its members were using bicycles in order to economize the precious rare fuel left in the city. This guild wasn't looking for a fight. The Raiders' purpose was to explore this new map ahead. Cannonballs kept ravaging the city. Its health was now almost down by 20%. Seo stated that the city was constantly taking damage, but Heiju claimed that it wasn't a problem, leaving the detective intrigued. The Flame Angel stated that it was not the same city anymore. With a smile on his face, the police officer agreed. The old man kept his calm. According to Dusik, they only needed to defend the attacked area of the city, and the Spear Maiden could even use the wall as a platform while it was being built. One of the raiders desperately requested assistance while his guild master was in awe in front of a wall. Meanwhile, Wong Park kept giving firm instructions to his men. Some of the citizens wanted to use the cannonballs in order to produce gear, seeing how sturdy it was and effective against Heiju. While a hooded figure examined the cannonballs, it seemed like it found something. Jiayu decided to sell her newfound data to the highest bidder. The elements like Yule, the serpent, Dusik, and many other variables were still elements of chaos. But someone was spying on Seo and Hiju's conversation. The spy wore the heroic protective gear called Shadow Fit, making its wearer invisible while hiding in the shadows. City number 17 still hadn't lost 1% of its total health. Robo was impressed by City number 8's potential despite entering the game a month ago. Level 33 Hank Sith, who was an elite citizen, was worried that the knight gave them too much intel, while the level 47 Emma Hilt thought that it would be for the best if city number 8 gained power. As for the level 50 Kane Bior, he thinks that they could have simply obliterated everything if it was a Majoig mission. Rubble told them to be patient, since everything would go according to their player's will. The Swift Citizen card had been activated, making city number 17's inhabitants faster for a duration determined by the rolling of a 6-faced dice. With the blessing of 3 hours, Rubble ordered his troops to charge forward. And just like that, the citizens of city number 17 followed him into battle. The knight thought of his city as the player's chosen. He was convinced that they were relished by the entity. This knight wielded the legendary one-handed sword Stormbreaker, a powerful relic that could summon lightning. He then used the granted skill Chain Lightning to annihilate the defense towers that stood in his way. Without their player's goodwill, city number 17 would be unable to claim victory in this gigantic game regardless of how powerful their equipment is, or even how high one's level could actually become. Yul tried to free himself from the non-player character. The NPC managed to dodge his sword unharmed. The wielder of the book assumed that it had obtained max level just like him. But by fighting someone as strong as him, he came to a realization. Yul realized how poor of a combatant he truly was. He was still a rookie, but he had started to learn martial arts from the goblin swordsman as a precaution, which is why the wielder of the book was struggling so much. This made him wonder about the invasive analysis duration. According to the NPC, it was almost certain that Yul was cheating the game. It also decided to try different approaches in order to detect a bug in him. This made Yul realize that the guardian of the city wasn't prioritizing his life during the analysis, so he decided to summon his only overlord in order to assist him. But to his surprise, nothing happened. The quarantine zone forbade anyone inside from resorting to exterior assistance. Yul's situation was getting harder since he had to face a powerful opponent on his own. He was determined to get back in the game before the ultimate cannon targeted city number 8 once again. With a kick to the face, the non-player character decided to continue the invasive analysis. Yul was aware of a simple solution to vanquish it, but Yul had to win the fight first. The NPC's powerful kick sent the protagonist flying into the air. Yul started to lose hope when suddenly Karishna decided to help him. Yul couldn't believe his eyes. The non-player character decided to continue the physical checkup after seeing that the wielder of the book was still breathing. With that, the entity charged at the man, yet was left shocked upon clashing with him. The system notified the protagonist, who managed to block the claws of the NPC, that he obtained a new skill from Brit of Krishna. Yul unlocked Overlord Possession, which allowed one Overlord to possess him in exchange for not summoning the said Overlord for the rest of the mission. With that, Yul acquired the Goblin Swordsman's sharp skills. He didn't like the owner of the book for this reason, but now Yul prayed to not attack the Demon Lord upon seeing him to thank him for his precious aid. With that, Yul and the NPC were now truly fighting on equal grounds. As he gained new powers, both of them prepared to clash once again. Yul was now able to keep up with the guard. A unit's power isn't directly relative to its stats or equipment. In all games, it is very common to find someone with a pitiful level and equipment easily dominating the other players with gameplay alone. Following that logic, Jack's fighting skills, the Goblin Swordsman's fighting skills, would be the peak of performance. But just as Yul was thinking of the accomplishable feats by combining Jack's skills with his maxed-out stats, the Swordsman Ghost stated that it was useless. This sudden astral appearance startled the wielder of the book. Yul assumed that it was normal for Jack to appear as a soul when possessing him, yet what the goblin said left him intrigued. He feared that the non-player character was more combat-oriented than his overlord, but Jack denied it, stating that he was just criticizing his pitiful fighting skills. After that, Yul was given the option to let the Overlord control his body. Suddenly, Yul's face completely changed as his eyes changed colors. He then took his stance. The NPC was ready to defend itself, but his arm was suddenly severed by the Master Swordsman movement skill Superior Wind Movement, a storm which allowed the goblin to quickly move in a straight line. After that, the non-player character tried to strike the swordsman down, but Jack quickly dodged its sharp claw, before knocking the NPC off the ground. With that, the Goblin Sword Master decided to finish it off with the battle art named Celestial Wolf Fang Technique, Wolf Claw Moon Strike. But at the last moment, Yul restricted the Overlord from terminating the NPC, so Jack opted for striking it with 3 waves of Sword Aura. The non-player character was left damaged but not destroyed. Jack scolded Yul for not telling him to spare it earlier, but the poor man didn't have a chance to speak. And as the goblin spirit left his body, Yul decided to attend to the most critical matter first. By using 50,000 points, he could use the make peace function, an issue made to spare those who harm the NPC by accident, to send it back to its spawn point while removing its hostility. But the problem is that the non-playable character needed to be neutralized first. This made the wielder of the book wonder if he passed the first part of the invasive analysis. But the empty silence in the room made him grow anxious, when suddenly a mysterious voice informed him that he passed the physical checkup. With that, the system began the final analysis. This made Yule wonder if he had more challenges ahead, and if the mysterious voice came out of the void itself. Meanwhile, the lieutenant was reviewing the books offered to him by Roble. With that, he decided to check the provided intel. Wong summoned his shield and stating that he and Minyu would go first while the rest of the men covered them. The soldiers were in awe in front of the item given to their lieutenant by the Golden Deity. Some items were constantly present while others could be summoned, like Wong's shield, whose owner was happy with its functionality. Since the heroic shield, known as the Shield of Helden the Inquisitor, who had the ability to perform miracles, would be problematic with trying to enter a car. Minyu and the lieutenant then charged forward. The Shield of Helden created a divine-type energy shield in front of them, whose power was proportional to Wong's friendship with his party in order to protect them from the bullets. With that, they charged in the first requisite to enter the cannon tower. In order to enter the said tower, one must first use the side door of the mini tower. There the lieutenant found a goblin in command of the tower. The goblin was then quickly shot in the head. By taking control of his desk after eliminating the green monster, the attacker gains a low-level ID card, and after gathering 100 of those cards, one could obtain a high-level ID card. Collecting 100 of those high-level cards in order to obtain one master card made Guam realize how much effort this mission required. But this particular card will allow a team of 10 members at most to enter the cannon tower. With that, the objective was to create as many master cards as possible in order to infiltrate the necessary troops into the tower. The annoyed serpent found himself powerless in front of the main door, when suddenly, someone came to greet the villain. Jiayu decided to sell her intel to the serpent. The level 17 ordinary civilian Sulju Wu recognized her as the number 2 of the last mission. The teenager wanted to replace the negotiation with threats, yet the girl seemed unfazed. Jiayu stated that this bargain would determine how they should treat each other from now on. She then reminded him how she ended up in second position in the treasure hunt and found the key intel to win it despite working alone as proof of her talent. Soldier Wu proposed to hear what she had to offer since Jiayu approached the serpent despite his status as a dangerous villain. Admiring her daring personality, she stated that they should spare her life if the information provided turned out to be useful. Jiayu stated that Sulji must be wise according to her old age. This led to some tension rising between the two of them, leaving the serpent in the middle of it, to the point where even the great villain felt frightened. Meanwhile, someone gathered multiple low-level ID cards. They all began to shine in Roble's hand. A high-level ID card had been acquired. City number 17 was now in possession of 12 high-level ID cards after losing 42 men and having 123 injured. The troops were all advised to be careful on the battlefield, yet they were all excited to fight for their player. But because of this, City number 17 was now in possession of more cards than City number 8. Suddenly, Roble began to pray. Seeing this, his archer friend also began to pray. The Royal Knight didn't want the citizens to sacrifice their lives for the player, but to dedicate them to him. With that, they charged onward. Roble then recalled how Yul Choi is supposed to be the most powerful in their city, yet the man had been absent from the action for a long time. He thinks that Yul refused to contribute to his city's well-being despite being a powerful unit. In other words, he was unworthy of the power that dwells inside him. Meanwhile, inside the sphere of the quarantine chamber, the system had removed all active effects in order to proceed with the upcoming test. Yul found himself paralyzed by those odd rings. And so the inspection began, and with it, Yul Choi began to panic. The system began to carefully analyze the man's memory in order to determine if he was truly a defect that had met an unusual entity. And so the game began to dive deep into Yul's tormenting memory regarding the victims of the Greed Lord. This made the man cry that the system, unable to find anything, decided to investigate further. And so began the inspection of Yul's past life before the start of the game. The astonished young man found himself sitting at his desk. It was almost like he and the entire city hadn't left. The protagonist was now on the phone with his mother. He was also using his tablet, all at the same time. The genius man who began to ask about his father had now won 1,000 consecutive games of chess online. He then took out his phone to execute yet another task. Yul had just won $150, before reassuring his mother that he was alright. Yule then asked about a mysterious person. The mother's words seemed to have worried her son. Eggy was certain that this person would be just fine, since he had always been the smartest between the two of them. With that, Yule decided to go to his part-time job. Suddenly, the memory of Yule began to glitch. The furious man strictly forbade the system from looking into his past life back on Earth. With that, the system decided to stop the analysis to prevent any material damage from the revolting unit. In the end, the system deduced that Yule never had any odd encounter with any entity and finally labeled him as a regular unit. And just like that, he would be sent back to the game. Yule was now back to the cannon tower map. This encounter with the system left the man completely exhausted. His wounds were finally healing, but Yule didn't expect the system to be able to disable his recovery, which usually drops by half during combat. Yule found himself in the same position as when he was struck with the punishment of the Demon Lord. In the end, his mighty power was just what the game allowed him to have. And so Yule decided to surpass this power granted to the pawns of the game. The ultimate cannon attacked city number 17, which was protected by the shield of black steel knights that protected it from all physical damage and partially from magic for one time. And just like that, city number 17 came out unharmed by the ultimate cannon, keeping the far most of its health. Yule was determined to be one day able to rival or surpass even the players. When a group of hunters passing by saw the overpowered unit lying on the ground, they assumed that he was just slacking off. And so one of the citizens proposed to head back before falling prey to his curse, yet one silent hunter didn't seem to agree. Kim suddenly raised his sword and went to Yule. And just like that, the man decided to stab the wielder of the book in the throat, leaving his comrades terrified. Yet Yule, who remained uninjured by the man, wanted to know why he tried to take his life. But Kim returned the allegations towards Yule by calling him a charlatan. The man used to put his absolute trust in Yule's book and even defied death for him. But in the end, Kim had nothing left, not even the necessary 10 points to save his daughter, he declared as he raised his sword. The blade broke as he claimed that his late offspring was just a 7-year-old child. But the unharmed Yule decided to remind the man what happens when someone crosses him. The terrified teammates implored the man to Yule. But in an instant, he used the power of the Overlord to immobilize the men with pressure point nerve paralysis. And so Yule declared that Kim should come and seek his head once he maxes out his stats. With that, he decided to turn them into victims of the Greed Lord, leaving the father's eyes filled with unsatisfied bloodlust, before reminding them that he will also curse other innocent citizens as well. And just like that, the new victims of the Greed Lord were isolated in a truck. Kim apologized to his teammates for what happened, but the men understood his grief, before reminding the man that he should level up and better his gear, just like Yule said before facing him. At his current level, Kim would never be able to seek justice for his dead child. And with that, the level 9 Yujin Kim swore to become more powerful in order to eliminate Yule Choi by his own hands. With that, he began to picture the moment of his revenge. Meanwhile, Yule was watching the new victims from afar. The Goblin Sword Master was confused as to why he punished those men instead of retreating. But Yule affirmed that Kim would have been overcome by rage if he had just left, leaving his teammates prey to danger. The wielder of the book also had another reason. Suddenly, a massive robot emerged from the ground. Yule wanted to save the men from the boss monster known as Doom Machine Octopus that was created by the combination of multiple mini towers boosting all its abilities. With that, the monster immediately opened fire. Field boss monsters spawn at a regular rhythm in this mission, but killing one as strong as a raid boss would grant Yule an immediate master card to enter the cannon tower, a much easier way than collecting 10,000 low-level cards. Yet this shortcut was also more lethal, and so Yule activated Jack's powers as he summoned his sword. And just like that, the protagonist charged forward. His target was the giant robotic octopus. The wielder of the book slashed the creature with ease by using the battle art known as Celestial Wolf Fang technique, Descent of the Black Wolf. And just like that, the level 5 threat fell to Yule's blade. But Jack scolded him for executing so many unnecessary moves that lacked focus, making him waste his energy uselessly. The swordsman then stated that Yule should keep a focused mind in order to not fall to Precipitation's problems while seeking power. The wielder of the book then thanked his overlord for his wisdom. Then he didn't want to use his MasterCard just yet, since once inside the tower, the only available exits were either victory or death. And so Yule decided to attend to the other problems first. Jack was left shocked. He didn't expect to see Yule breaking into city number 17's castle. The king called the young man arrogant for barging suddenly into their city, demanding an audience with their player. Yule came all this way to threaten the king. The wielder of the book was aware of city number 17's betrayal, yet the king kept denying it. but Yule asked him to drop the act. As he was aware of the citizen's state, all citizens of city number 17 picked up their weapons. In addition, Yule was already aware of the many spies crawling inside his city. The king planned to betray his allies right before completing the mission. With that, the old man got off his throne, stating that he could just change the subjects. But all would be pointless in front of the book's omnipotence. And so Yule gave him an ultimatum, stating that the king would be killed if he didn't cooperate. The royal man stated that Yule's power made him prideful and arrogant, that he still hadn't fought a real player, and so the card duel was activated, allowing one to make his unit fight with an opponent in single combat inside a coliseum where the strongest level becomes equal to the weaker unit. With that, the level 99 city mayor Remulus von Lexus claimed that his player's plans would remain hidden once he had silenced his opponent. The kitten, armed with Upiter, the epic great sword named after the sky god that controls lightning, charged the young man, stating that this book was the cause of his downfall. And just like that, powerful bolts of lightning filled the arena. According to Remulus von Lexus, his opponent was no different from a newie without his immense level. The old man was sure to win when they were both at the same level. Yet he was shocked to see Yule dodging the blades so swiftly, before suddenly striking him from the back. And just like that, the city mayor was ejected into the air. Unlike him, his overlord didn't rely on a high level. With that, it looked like a powerful dragon just penetrated the old man. They all stated that Remulus von Lexus' defeat should serve as a warning for his subjects, while Jack couldn't help but admire the old man's strength. With that, Yule and the defeated king were teleported back into the palace, leaving the guard in a state of panic. The scared soldiers took out their swords, but the wielder of the book stated that they should just work together on this joint mission. This unexpected defeat of the king even made the player of city number 17 shiver in fear. Suddenly, all soldiers felt alarmed. The odd behavior intrigued Yule. All the guards had a sudden rise of bloodlust. The once hesitant soldiers now charged without any hesitation. His behavior even confused the lieutenant who was on the field. Even he was left confused, as he saw all the units of city number 17 quickly retreating to their city. This city was now under the effect of Frenzied City, which increases the power of all the units of the player, while making them hostile towards any alien presence. A sudden explosion occurred inside the castle. Yule theorized that Frenzied City was the card that they were planning to use to betray city number 8 later on. Jupiter's power was once again activated. The surprised Yule immediately evaded the lightning bolts. He didn't expect city number 17 to use this card so soon. Upon landing, the young man was left surprised. Someone was waiting for him. In the end, those citizens weren't the player's relished units and were nothing more than obedient little puppets. And so the Green Hand used his cards to increase his citizens' attributes and make them all target Yule at once. Conquering the cannon tower to clear the mission would take him a whole day, and sparing the units of city number 17 meant leaving them to fight the units of city number 8. Jack proposed to do the dirty work for his master, but the young man declined, and so he decided to summon his sword. Multiple citizens charged at him all at once. The protagonist decided to accept the sinful burden of his. After that, a huge magical explosion roared through the city, and so the frenzied units were slashed to pieces. There was no more coming back from the current carnage. Yule lifted his gaze to the sky. The player of city number 17 began to panic upon seeing that the system was unable to show him the attacker. With that, multiple explosions emerged through the city. Suddenly, Yule was attacked by bolts of lightning, but he was able to blot them with ease. With that, father and son charged at him. Yule was unsure if his words could reach them, but he promised the fallen city to avenge them for their 150 years of slavery as he killed their prince and king. Romulus couldn't believe it. The severed head looked at his player one last time. The streets were now tainted in blood. Yule single-handedly butchered the citizens of city number 17 until nightfall. The protagonist was now covered in human blood. Jack came to check on him, but he affirmed that he was unwell. Even when mentally prepared for this inevitable butchery, the guilt was still too bitter, and so he decided to shake off the subject. Since the citizens of city number 8 wouldn't be able to clear this mission on their own, Yule had no other choice but to do it himself. When suddenly, he received a notification from the system. Player number 17 was left without his units, and if they could be resurrected, the player was due to be degraded into a city ear, a maximum level raid boss. Yule was shocked by this sudden discovery. This made him realize that the players weren't the greatest force in this game. The player number 17 was now banned from the system and robbed of his status, and so the entity was now a city ear. Suddenly, his eyes turned red as he received his final notification. With that, the city eater decided to crush city member 8 under his massive hammer, leaving his player hesitant. With that, he decided to take a look at his deck of cards. One of his cards would allow him to use a die to move his city away from danger by abandoning all the rewards won during the current mission. The protagonist charged at the massive entity. Their player was now about to use his card. Haiju and Seo also tried to save the city. All seemed to have lost hope as a giant hammer began to descend upon them. Suddenly, the golden hand stopped. In the end, it decided not to use his card, resulting in the massive hammer destroying his city. City number 8 was now shredded into pieces, but Yoel woke up to his book glowing red. He was surprised to see himself alive when his city fell, but Yoel was even more shocked by the presence in front of him. With that, he immediately attacked the demon lord, who stopped him with just one finger. Yoel began to regain the memories of their first and last encounter. The young man now remembers it all. The owner of the book judged him worthy and so decided to give him a chance as promised. A cold silence filled the empty white room. Yoel was concerned about the other citizens. The demon lord affirmed that they had all met their end. With that, the survivor fell to his knees. According to Krishna, simple units couldn't possibly defeat a sea eater. Their city was destined for doom since only players could stop them. This made Yoel burst out in anger while asking about the game and its players. He also wanted to know why he was the only survivor. The demon lord had all the answers, but now was not the time to give them. Yoel had little time ahead of him to bring his fallen city back to life. These words shocked the very soul of the young man. Krishna summoned a glitched item, confirming his own words. Reviving city number 8 was possible. This intrigued the young man. Yoel was no longer questioning the owner of the book. He had lost everything after all. And so glitching fragments began to cover his sword. Krishna gave his power to Yoel in order to eliminate the city ear, and only then would the greed lord revive everyone. He admired his sword as it started to glow purple, but he found the idea of defeating the massive entity with his simple blade ridiculous. When he suddenly found himself in space, Yoel was now face to face with the fallen player number 17. The city ear immediately swung his giant weapon, and was unable to hit the protagonist. This strike resulted in a powerful blast. That blasted the young man away. Yoel could still feel the strike dwelling in his bones despite surviving it. Krishna informed him that city eaters were the strongest creatures in the game and that even players try to avoid them. By reaching the limits of his power, he was able to make Yoel as strong as a city eater. This made the young man angry as the demon lord insinuated that he would be the only one responsible if he loses. But the protagonist was alarmed to see the fallen player using a card. The entity used summon meteors to invoke a number of meteors equal to the number of the 12 face dice. But Yoel managed to parry and evade all rocks coming his way. According to the owner of the book, Yoel was currently equal of a player, and even his gear and abilities now equal the cards employed by players. Yoel had now fused with his overlord, landing a devastating attack on the city eater's face. This made the mask of the fallen player crack. With that, the entity fell to the ground. Yet Yoel felt startled. Giant tentacles appeared out of nowhere and tried to crush him. But Yoel managed to cut 2 of them. He wanted to ask the greed lord a question. His question regarded players. Yoel wanted to know if they were all this hideous. Krishna denied, stating that all players were different when it comes to appearance, thinking, behavior, and even cards. With that, the city eater decided to use thunderstorm, which made lightning bolts appear in a wide area. And so, many lightning bolts began to descend from the sky. Thunderstorm successfully hit the protagonist. This made the young man realize the existence of city eaters superior to the one he's facing. Yoel found it disappointing. As he parried the lightning bolts, he thought his task would be much simpler if all players were like this city eater. This statement intrigued the demon lord. As he summoned the swords of the king and prince of city number 17, using telepathy to harness them, he boldly claimed that their old player was a weak opponent. Despite having many cards in hand, the fallen player was keeping his distance from Yoel. This meant that the entity feared an up-close fight with the human. The city eater also kept using wide-range spells like bombardment, which summons non-elementary shells to take out a small target like Yoel. The protagonist started to move his fingers in order to command his other 2 swords as he realized something about the city eater. This creature had never attacked another opponent head-on, which is why it is only using powerful cards so hazardously. The monstrosity had a wide arsenal of powerful cards along with its titanic size. Yoel slid to his right, before a giant explosion occurred. Yoel used the free warp ticket to save himself at the last moment. The demon lord noticed that his unit was taking his time getting close to the city eater instead of going right at him. This tactic aimed to mentally mess with the monster, and also to empty his hand. After all, it was futile to relentlessly attack mindlessly, said the greed lord as Yoel prepared to end the fight. Just like that, the fallen player was stabbed with a heroic sword. Yul then activated Chain Lightning. With that, the entity suffered as it was struck by lightning. Yul then asked the creature if it enjoyed mimicking the divine, while manipulating their lives as he held the legendary Tool Weather Orb that could change the weather in a small domain for a short time. The protagonist also decided to use Jupiter's unique skill, Overcharge, that absorbs any nearby form of lightning, but would also damage the user when overcharged. The creature began to tremble. Yul didn't have the heroic sword in his hand since he was using telepathy to control it remotely. This allowed him to employ a new form of attack, and so a massive bolt of lightning was launched by the protagonist, inflicting massive damage to the vile abomination. That was quadrupled by Overcharge and the combination of Jupiter and Electric Shock. In addition, the special skill Rage of the Thunder God allowed the heroic blade to unleash all accumulated power at once. With that, the fight came to an end, and the player found himself with his very guts exposed. Yul was surprised to see the monster still alive. He wanted to turn him into a lab rat, but the protagonist had to terminate him in order to bring his fallen city back. With that, he stabbed the city eater, and so the creature began to crack. But Yul didn't expect the mass of the monster to accumulate itself around his sword. The owner of the book asked the young man to step a little further since he still had work for him. With that, the city eater's flesh began to change shapes. The confused Yul found himself in front of a perfectly spherical egg, when it suddenly began to hatch. A man with horns came out of the egg. Yul wondered if it was his plan all along. The man began to breathe again after ends. The greed lord Krishna affirmed that it smelled as vile as ever. But Yul was more interested in him fulfilling his side of the contract, and so the demon lord activated his red magic. So Yul prepared himself for combat. But to his surprise, the remains of his fallen city began to move. All the pieces were coming together, and just like that, city number 8 was fully restored. The amazed young man couldn't believe his eyes, yet the streets were empty of people. This made Yul assume that the Green Lord, but the entity stated that it should just be patient. The power that he absorbed from this city eater could only restore the structure of city number 8, but in order to revive the citizens, Prashina would need to absorb other fallen players. But Yul was convinced that the Demon Lord was hiding his true power, judging by all he consumed until now. The entity seemed surprised. The city must gain experience from units trading their points, making it go to the next level, which most likely gives players a form of currency used to buy cards. That was the only logical explanation for the cycle of resources in this game and how the players could get their hands on plans and cards. But Yul was curious about all the points that he had spent without making the city evolve. According to the young man, there could only be one explanation. This made the Demon Lord burst out in laughter like a madman. He couldn't help but admire Yul's genius intellect. Krishna was amazed by the young man's ability to see the bigger picture after losing everything and fighting a fallen player. This made Yul speculate that the entity had encountered their player before, when suddenly his glowing sword appeared right in front of him. The Demon Lord confirmed that he has the necessary strength, but it would be saved for later use. But he asked Yul to trust him as he assured the young man that he would fulfill his promise to him while releasing a massive blow of wind. This disturbed the protagonist, who suddenly found himself above his newly restored city. The Demon Lord then asked him to observe, as he pointed to the real appearance of the game. Yul was shocked as none of this was present while facing the city ear, but there was a simple reason. The game would only allow one to see what he is supposed to. Suddenly, a new perception was opened to Yul. He was now in front of yet another colossal entity. Yul looked like a pebble in front of the giant mountain of flesh. The Demon Lord needed to consume 3 more fallen players. All the units of city number 8 would be revived once all 3 were slain, just as promised. With that, the city would be fully placed back in the game. And with that, the Demon Lord of Greed would become its new player. The City Eater used one of his cards to bless itself with flight. With that, it was able to close the distance between itself and the human. Yul was amazed by this speed. Suddenly, multiple heads emerged from the City Eater. The creature divided itself into multiple parts. This made Yul worry that he would face 3 fallen players at once. But he was even more astonished that the creatures used 1 card to summon 3 non-elemental shields to protect the 3 of them and absorb a part of the damage, which meant that the 3 are 1. Suddenly, 2 of the monstrosities collided with each other, with Yul in the middle struggling not to get crushed by them. As for the 3rd one, it equipped itself with a blade using a card. Yul was intrigued by the fallen player's strategy, seeing how its 3 parts shared buffs but not the longsword. The Demon Lord claimed that just like humans, each player is unique when it comes to their abilities, before asking Yul not to let him down since City Eaters had already lost the game. He also claimed that nothingness awaits the young man if he fails to slay them. But the protagonist, who was fighting for his life, didn't want to hear any of it and ordered the Greed Lord to resurrect the citizens. So Prakshina told him to be at ease, since everything is already prepared. Jiayu and Haiju were confused as they were supposed to be on the other side, when suddenly the Demon Lord addressed them, as all citizens were startled by an unknown pressure crushing them. The entity introduced itself as Krishna, their resurrector. None were able to stand as he claimed to be their new player in charge. The serpent assumed that he must be one of the greatest bosses as a player of the game. But as the greedy teenager claimed that he would kill him to gain ultimate power, he suddenly stopped. It was unclear if he stopped himself or if he was frozen, and it felt like time itself ceased to exist. The new player claimed that they were to listen to him in silence. It claimed that the citizens were now standing between thriving and demise, so they were free to enter the White Gate to resume their existence or walk to the Black Gate, where they would peacefully journey to the other side. The humans were to choose their fate once the doors opened. This made them assume that Krishna was asking them to commit suicide, that the idea wasn't fully revolting it meant the end of the infernal game. But one person raised their hand to ask him something. The Demon Lord accepted to answer. This person was none other than the Dragon Warrior. As she, the detective, the inspector, and the lieutenant stood straight in this immense pressure, she asked about the time for the gates to open. Dusik, the Konomal, and other citizens were also eager to rejoin the fight. The new player watched them in silence, before snapping his fingers to summon a screen broadcasting Yule fighting the City Eater. All were shocked to see him on the big screen. Peiju was intrigued about her friend's opponent when the Greed Lord stated that the gate would open once he wins. So he showed the City Eaters on the screen and presented them as the disaster they would have to face once back to life. So the humans should think carefully since the Greed Lord had no use for those who cowered in front of the impossible. Yule clashed with the giant charging barrier as the other two attacked him from behind, where the protagonist activated the skill known as Gravity Ball, which used a powerful force to attract everything, a unit's caster if in range of it. With that, all three City Eaters were swiftly pulled to the same point, and so all three were slammed into each other. As the City Eaters were getting slashed, revealing Yule from under their carcasses, he raised his sword for the final strike, and slashed the monstrous tentacle ball in half. The three City Eaters finally met their end at the hands of the protagonist. The exhausted Yule then implanted his sword into his second fallen player, and with that, the tentacles faded into nothingness. This fight made Yule realize that he wouldn't be able to regenerate while fighting these monstrosities. He gave me a reminder that time was against him. As he summoned the power of the Overlord, he asked for the next fallen player. Suddenly, something began to appear from the fog. This foe was the fourth one. All citizens would be resurrected once this City Eater is slain. To increase his chances of winning, the creature used multiple cards at once before assaulting his minuscule target. Keiju was scared for Yule, while the lieutenant was astonished by the power of their future adversary. This made the citizens fall into despair, seeing how small units were giving them a hard time. The monster's axes smashed the ground. Seeing how the fallen player only engaged in close combat, Yule could come up with many strategies to take it down, but found himself racing the clock. He was also able to blunt the massive weapon with his blade. In that case, Yule decided to let himself be possessed by Jag, leaving the duel to the real fighter, who immediately struck the giant creature. The City Eater began to bleed as it screamed in pain. The Master Swordsman was amazed by all the crazy fights Yule put him in, including this one. But when offered advice by the owner of the body, he immediately declined, since the goblin could perfectly see the path of his blade. And so the man was now covered in blood after endlessly slashing the titanic monstrosity. All the citizens watched the fight, amazed and in silence. The last City Eater fell to Yulchoi's blade, and so the humans were now free to enter the gate of their choosing. All units could confront a hellish life or peacefully succumb to the embrace of death. Yul was now back to city number 8, but its streets were still empty. Krishinov assured him that he kept his word, as all the citizens were choosing a path that only they could choose. The city was still out of the game. Yul wanted to know if the canon mission was still going on, which the new player affirmed. The mission wasn't over yet, but the original player of city number 8 deserted them after his game piece's destruction. At this moment, Krishina took his place. Becky was powerless to stop the city's demise. In other words, the great demon lord couldn't do anything since he was still a beginner, leaving him silent. Before losing the game, the players receive a countdown, which you will use to kill the City Eaters. With that, an hourglass appeared in the new player's hand, who stated that the other units used the countdown to choose between life and death. City number 8 began to emerge from the empty square. With that, the city resumed its journey in the game. And with that, the canon mission would continue after an hour and 6 minutes. Yul was satisfied with the time remaining. The Demon Lord also affirmed that no one would any longer become victims of the Greed Lord. He no longer needed victims since he owned city number 8, but Yule denied it, since this city actually belongs to its inhabitants who went back to fight for it. All units were back in the game. Even the angry serpent and his minions were brought back to life. Jiayu and the raiders were brought back to the canon map. The odd one was happy with the outcome, when suddenly a huge explosion erupted. The Angel of Flames destroyed too many towers. As something came close to her, suddenly the earth beneath her began to shake. The boss of difficulty 5, known as Doom Machine Earthworm, made from many towers, appeared. With that, Haiju ordered to warn the others not to draw the boss's attention, as the earthworm chased her through the map, and finally, the giant target was in position. With that, the Doom Machine received great damage from the lay trap, and so the giant mechanical beast found itself decapitated. The Spear Maiden praised her partner for his precision, but Yule returned the compliment, giving all the credit to her for being stronger, before asking her to protect the city since this mission would be over soon. And with his master card, Yule was able to enter the cannon tower that he wouldn't be able to exit until the end of the challenge. With that, he entered the cannon tower. Now in its first floor, known as the City of Minor Goblins, Yule found it disappointing. Seeing the wasted resources of this mission, the player asked him to focus on the bigger picture, as he activated the headhunt card that sends to the boss one of his units present in the same dungeon. Krishna stated that it was all for the sake of the ultimate victory. Suddenly, a goblin piloting a giant machine attacked the young man, as he tried to shower him with bullets. Yule disappeared from the spot, and so the goblins assumed him dead and celebrated their victory, but were suddenly shocked to learn that their boss on top of the cannon tower was slain just after. The level 6 boss, known as Multibrain, was swiftly defeated, Yule decapitating it. The protagonist ignored all the other monsters and went straight for the crucial kill, bringing victory to city number 8, and so Yule was teleported back. All those who were outside the city were brought back to their home, and all eyes were on the man who was once the greatest villain. But Yule decided to ignore them and went on his way, when suddenly someone called for his attention. Yule received a mysterious container. This small gift was these people's token of gratitude. Yule politely thanked them, before flying off. As they watched him fade into the horizon, Eugene Kim claimed that he and others weren't brought back by hope, but by the powerful desire of seeing Yule Choi as a rotting corpse. The city now had a 24-hour rest before the next mission. The owner of the book and its wielder were both alone on top of the tallest tower. Yule was happy to see that everyone was resurrected and no one would become a victim of the Greed Lord ever again. Suddenly, the protagonist tried to slash the Demon Lord with a surprise attack, but Krishna was curious that Yule's blade could reach him. The joking young man was aware that this Demon Lord was nothing more than a projection, before pointing out that he still had use for the Greed Lord, piquing the player's curiosity. If Yuna was surprised when the player, who aimed to make him reach the end of the game, let him decide the next step of the plan, but was also embarrassed when the Demon Lord pointed out that Yule had more experience manipulating City Number 8. They all seemed to have something in mind involving their new player. Despite the difficulty, the Greed Lord accepted to grant the request as a favor for his new game piece. Suddenly, all the city began to shake. Entire buildings began to levitate into the air, leaving everyone confused. The Units Training Center was a building that the player could create in his own city in order to train his units by fighting fake opponents, despite not granting any rewards that helped units gain experience without risking their lives. But according to its owner, this unit training center was unique, since it was able to teleport the units to existing maps to gain rewards in exchange for putting their lives on the line. The book owner and the book wielder were both in the control center of the new construct. The regulations were now done. Yule crafted special training programs for the city's strongest unit, but had to wait for the right map to put them to use. By using the special unit training center, the strongest units like the Spear Maiden could finally begin their training. For Demek, Yule informed her that they only had 18 hours left since tailoring the training took some time. But due to the Greed Lord's power, time will pass differently for Hyeju. She would spend an entire year on the training map, but if she wishes to retreat or in case of emergency, the Dragon Warrior could break the hard glass in order to come back to the city. But this wasn't the only path to gain power, which is why Yule asked her to remain careful out there. For her special training, the Angel of Flame was sent to the land of the Dormant Sun. Determined, she aimed to complete her training. The set goal was to earn the respect of prominence the owner of the very weapon she uses. As for the two detectives in the Forsaken Mountain of the Old Kings, Seo and Dusik had to locate the vessels of Wonsa and Wusa. For the lieutenant and his team's special training in the map known as the Mausoleum of Dormant Demons, the squad had to face terrifying demons. as they sought to awaken the master of the map and take up his will. As for the next scalar training, the insolent serpent asked to be released from the unit training center as he lifted his middle finger. But the villain was confused when Yule offered him one last opportunity. The wishing orb that the teenager wielded could either become of light or darkness depending on his karma. To put it simply, it could either become a dragon on the path of righteousness or an evil serpent upon walking the path of malice. Normally, it would take one some time to decide his actions, but now the serpent's choice would save them great time. The young villain was free to leave the unit training center, but at the risk of letting the other units surpass him. And so the young man thought about it for a while. The serpent was indifferent to the others' training but loathed Yule's assumptions, and so he chose the path of darkness for his wishing orb. With that, his training began. The young man couldn't believe his eyes. He was now on the horrific map known as Venom of the Wishing Serpent, with the only goal of staying alive. With that, the main units all began their training, and Yule created virtual spaces for the rest of the citizens to sharpen their skills. The guild master of the raiders wanted to repeat the ogre mission, but his members were less excited about it, seeing how they lost miserably. Meanwhile, in room 3F06, Kim wanted to simulate a fight against Yule Choi, so the system asked him if he wanted to lower the target's immense level. But the vengeful man wanted to face his prey as it was, and so began his impossible training. With Yule Choi monitoring the key unit's adventures, he decided to address the crucial subjects with the Greed Lord. Yule wanted to firstly know what the Greed Lord was, since he wasn't exactly a demon lord or a player. Yet Krishna found the question pointless, since getting city number 8 back to Earth was the main concern. With that, he assured the young man that he only speaks the truth. Yule wasn't surprised by the entity avoiding the question, but had a theory about it. This piqued the Greed Lord's curiosity. The young man wanted to know more about the city's first player. He wanted to know if abandoning them instead of losing them all was a way of preventing him from turning into a city eater. But according to the new player, the old one still controlled some units. Yule was astonished upon realization. The old player of city number 8 controlled another game piece. This explains why he didn't put so much effort into them and easily turned his back on their city. The Golden Hand used city number 8 as a way to farm resources for his first game piece. But since he didn't get much due to the victims of the Green Lord, the old player didn't hesitate to abandon city number 8. Yule's assumption was accurate, but not all players get multiple pieces. The Golden Hand now above game piece number 43 was, in fact, a particular entity. The units were all butchered, with a few left on their feet. 3 cities allied with each other in order to take one down, and yet they failed to even come close to it. Suddenly, someone approached the injured man. The panicked units feared the nearby individual, and so the old samurai used the battle art known as Thousand Blossoms in the Sky that could deal great damage within a shower of moves. But with one swing of a sword, the old samurai was stabbed in the heart, meeting his end, leaving him confused as to how the blue-eyed knight predicted his movements. Seeing this, the cowboy readied his legendary rifle known as Pioneering Spirit that was once owned by an explorer who conquered a continent and deals great damage to non-human targets. He used the battle art spaghetti western that allowed the man to fire the gun without wasting any bullets while decreasing the reloading time. But the bloody sword parried the bullet, and with that, the cowboy was killed by one of his own bullets that was redirected by the monster sword that pierced his head. Then suddenly, the masked mate tried to take him from behind. But the blue-eyed knight began to walk away. His sword left him planted in the last warrior's throat, leaving the dying man confused. He was unsure if the blue-eyed knight uncovered his strategy or if he had just set him a trap. The masked swordsman was as clueless as he was scared. Despite fighting them for a week, this army kept silent even among themselves. With that, the masked knight drew his last breath. City number 99 was known as the White City of Silence, with its strongest unit being Yun Choi, its maxed-out invincible mayor. And with the rest period coming to an end, the player threw the dice. The city was now on the Dungeon Rush Square, where random dungeon's goal was to slay the boss inside. Once the countdown reached 0, the dungeon gates would open, freeing a wave of monsters. Dungeon Rush is a joint mission, and so another city that also landed on a similar square would be invoked to the map. Yule pointed out that it would be their city's first time being summoned to another square. And so city number 8 joined city number 32 for a joint mission of 5 days, and with that, the mission began. Yule decided to use his main item. By combining the writ of Krishna with the status window, the young man was able to make all dungeon data public, labeling their difficulty from A to D. With that, he decided to venture to city number 32 and proposed to join forces. Yet the Greed Lord stated that his units were fully capable of finishing the mission on their own. But Yul, who didn't think of the citizens as Karshina's belongings, aimed to return as many as possible to Earth, which is why he was determined to aid them. So the Greed Lord decided to recall their interaction with city number 17, but if one disaster were enough to stop Yul, then he would have never succeeded this much. The amused player wanted to see how long the young man would hold onto this idea. After that, in game piece number 32, the wielder of the book was left surprised. Despite offering data on the current mission, the other party refused to cooperate. The drunken level 97 city mayor, Carlson Bowner, had lost all hope for the city winning the game. City number 32, having lost all its best units, was short on equipment and resources and down to its last 1,000 citizens. Having lost all hope, the mayor advised the young man to focus on his city. Seeing the man's poor state, Yule understood that trying to reach him would be pointless, and so he decided to adopt a different approach. Carlson Bowner was convinced that city number 8 would eventually meet the same demise as his city, after reaching the White City of Silence and its fearsome mayor. Meanwhile, in the dungeon of the highest difficulty known as a Fragment of the Abyss, the level 5 boss named Sealed Fenrir, the giant wolf that loathed the divinities, was now facing the Angel of Flames. The Spear Maiden gained new skills after facing the owner of her fang for an entire year. Suddenly, draconic wings made of fire burst out of her back. In the past, Haiju could only borrow the dragon's power. Fenrir felt the great danger rising from this single girl. Now the Spear Maiden could even adopt the dragon's traits. With that, the giant wolf began to chant a spell, making ice spikes rise in the dungeon. But a small light could be seen from behind the thick ice. The poor monster didn't have enough time to react. And with that, the great wolf was eaten by Prominence's fire, which resulted in the conquest of the level a dungeon, with most credits going to Fenrir's slayer. Krishna was pleased with his unit's surprising new strength, stating that he was wise to leave your training to the protagonist. If the Green Lord's curiosity was piqued upon seeing the young man lost in his thoughts. Yo was worried about not being able to convince the other game pieces, yet player number 8 was satisfied by them not becoming an obstacle. The young man was persuaded that city number 32 wouldn't survive the mission without their assistance, so Krishna asked him to tell his master what he wishes from him, which annoyed the independent young man. Yo wanted to conquer their city. This idea pleased the greedy player number 8. Someone was exiting a dungeon. The dungeon crumbled behind the Angel of Flames, who was curious about the next one, when suddenly something caught her attention. A titanic entity was facing a mysterious flying individual. The player used a card to summon magic missiles that never missed their target, but Yolchua was easily able to slice his way through them. According to Greed Lord, a player only leaves his astral form upon becoming a city eater after losing the game or when challenged by another player to a one-on-one battle. Player number 32 accepted the PvP match. Normally, both sides had to give their consent for the battle, but Krishna had the ability to oblige the other party to accept the challenge. And so player number 32 began to bleed after suffering a critical hit. Yola concentrated all the power into his palm and used it to implant his blade even further into the entity's flesh. With that, player number 32 was defeated by the young man. And so the Greed Lord, who would opt for taking the resources for dismantling, was offered to choose the fate of the defeated city, but decided to keep the fallen city as a whole, as a favor granted to the strongest desperate unit. Yul denied being hopeless, so Krishna reminded him that he was the one paying the price. The Greed Lord usually absorbed the fallen player's essence, but this detail was of small importance. The energy was rendered worthless in front of the lost fragment of the key. Yul then recalled how the Greed Lord uses the fragments to evade the game's strict rules, which made him assume that this was a hack. The victorious player then asked his unit to take care of all the dungeons that were transferred to city number 8 after the fall of city number 32. The Spear Maiden was shocked to see the system bombarding her with dungeon appearance novices. The colonel stated that the number of present dungeons had now doubled, yet Yul seemed to be at ease, since the citizens were very qualified to beat those dungeons, and with him as their guide, their mission would become easy to clear. Yet the Greed Lord wanted to know if this claim involved all those who loathed him, which he indirectly denied. The future of his game piece seemed brilliant. Meanwhile, someone was using the card known as Observing Eye to collect intel on it. But the crafty Greed Lord decided to use his power, stopping the Golden Hand from spying on him and his city. The old player number 8, who turned out to be the owner of the White City of Silence, seemed to have a plan in mind. The entity wanted to reveal Krishna's personal information to all other players, and so the city landed on the catch a burglar square this time. The goblin was violently punched in the face. Yet the green monster mocked the detective with a smile, since he had to catch the multiple goblins. Otherwise, the monsters would get to keep all the points and equipment they robbed the city of. Seeing the many hiding spots in the city, the goblin felt optimistic, but was stopped by a huge man with a scary face holding a torch. The first confused goblin was caught by a police officer. The second was stuck under Jayu's foot. They were confused by the units rapidly locating them. But all this was possible because of Yule's power. Things began to go well with the city units, the young man's plans, and the Book of the Greed Lord, allowing them to complete the missions on their own. At the end of each mission, they used Krishna's privileges as a player to upgrade the city by creating the Cornfield of Resilience, for example. They also gathered the items that would let them bend the rules of the game, and track down the fallen players in order to make their player more powerful. As for joint missions, the units of the Magic Sea of Buchin couldn't believe their eyes. They were shocked to see their players slain and defeated. City number 8 would slay the other players on joint missions in order to merge their cities together. They even persuaded the units to train themselves between missions, and so City number 8 evolved rapidly. The units didn't even need Yule's plans in order to finish the mission from this point on. Higgs' disasters only occurred in times of serenity. City number 8 was now on a Babel square, and so 4 cities were randomly placed on the same square with the objective of terminating each other. The lieutenant feared the existence of such missions. Dusek wanted to know if it would be the units or the city facing each other, but Siu didn't care since they were obligated to kill other human beings. Hinju feared such a moment arriving, yet the young villain looked forward to the upcoming confrontation. After all, it was this type of mission that suited him the most. Yet Yule stayed calm and didn't utter a word. Krishna stated that Yule, despite his strength, couldn't take on 3 players at once and proposed to terminate one at times. So Yule assumed that he was asked to just watch the carnage occur. The Greed Lord found it ironic that the young man reminded him that this was before they came to an agreement, and so Yule decided to take care of the enemy units first. But the protagonist was left confused, as all 3 cities rushed all at once and charged at city number 8 altogether. It seemed like the 3 other players decided to join forces, and so player number 8 activated Wall of Stone in order to shield his city. Suddenly, a colossal stone wall emerged from the heart of the earth, startling all hostile units. Yule couldn't endlessly defend, and so the protagonist had to rapidly terminate the 3 other players. The amused Greed Lord expected this answer as he summoned another fragment of the key, and so the other player consented to a one-on-one battle. The Greed Lord decided to grant his strongest unit's crazy wish. The 3 players used their cards to immediately attack the young man, but Yule quickly evaded them. And as he drew first blood, he stated that the first hit always brings victory. Yule was in a race against the clock. He had to slay one of the 3 players as quickly as possible, when suddenly the player disappeared from under him. Krishna noticed that the players weren't joining forces. They used the card known as Shrink to gain agility in exchange for decreasing their health. With that, the player quickly charged at the poor young man. Yule had a hard time pushing the giant monster away, and so was smashed into the ground. The player then flew away. Yule, who took some critical damage, couldn't believe his eyes, as the second player suddenly appeared, dashing towards him. As for the third entity, it was carefully planning its next move. It observed as a giant energy explosion emerged. Suddenly, the players noticed a bright light behind the thick cloud of dust. It was the first player getting slashed. Yule's rescuer was surprised. Jack was amazed to see his attacks being effective against players, so Yule pointed out that his skills and gear were currently equal to the cards of a player. This includes the skills of the Overlord as well. Yet the Goblin Swordsman wouldn't be able to rival Yule or a fallen player, according to the Greed Lord. And so all 3 monstrosities attacked all at once. Krishna found it better to let Jack possess his strongest unit. This piqued his curiosity about the young man's next move. The stones began to crumble, all prepared to fight upon seeing the wall of the Greed Lord falling apart. Wong noticed the soldier next to him trembling in fear. The lieutenant would understand if the man retreated since they were about to fight human beings. Yet the man decided to stand his ground, and was determined not to desert his team. Finally, the wall went down, and so the 3 armies rushed to exterminate the inhabitants of city number 8. Upon entering the hole in the wall, the hostile units saw one man standing in their way. It was none other than the serpent, determined to draw the first blood of this battle. Suddenly, the front guard froze in place. Those in the back were confused as they saw them running away to the rear. The villain activated his terrifying power. His venom reduced his victims to mere sacks of bones as he absorbed all their experience points. But those who survived were either grunting in immense pain or begging for the sweet embrace of death. The teenager's orb obtained karma points as he refused to finish off the suffering man, and with that, he now had enough Yule karma points. And so began the evolution of the merciless. Meanwhile, Jack was using his sword technique to fight the players. All three of them were powerful, but it is also said that a worthy foe is a better teacher than time could ever be. And so the Overlord decided to give it his all in this fight. As he and the player faced off, a giant bolt of lightning was forming in the sky. One of the players used an elemental shield that could easily counter elemental attacks, yet it was rendered weak in front of physical damage. Yol gained the upper hand on one of the players, but the third one decided to use a card to defend his kin. Krishna observed a massive explosion forming in front of his eyes. He noticed that the Overlord was about to crumble, and that city number 8 was no match for 3 cities all at once. But the young man seemed to be waiting for something, piquing the Greed Lord's curiosity. A man dressed like an Italian gangster entered the wall. Old Man Parp was surprised to hear the man greeting him in Italian, but was even more shocked upon learning that the man named Jung and Kim was actually South Korean, making him question his attire. The outsider revealed that this style satisfied their players' taste and asked them to give up since their player didn't seem to cherish their city. The old man seemed shocked. As he swore to give them a tormentless death, the serpent suddenly appeared behind Jung and Kim. The young villain who enjoyed his victim's agony repelled the man with his venom claws. He was pleasured by his prey's blood dripping all over his face. And so began the serpent's carnage as he massacred the enemy armies. But the citizens of city number 8 were also suffering from his poisonous gas. Yet the bloodthirsty high schoolers couldn't care less. And so the Angel of Flames had to intervene, reminding the villain that they were all on the same side. But to her surprise, the serpent easily intercepted her fang of prominence. Suddenly, the young man let out an animalistic scream, worrying everyone. By collecting enough evil karma, the high schooler evolved into a corrupt serpent. Seeing this, Haiju asked Park to lead the citizens to safety. The city's situation was critical enough, but the young villain managed to make their task even harder as usual. A wall of stone was able to shield the city from 3 armies, yet the corrupt serpent pierced through it with ease. The crazed beast tried to consume the Angel of Flames. City mayors Miyamoto Kojiro and Sanctual Don Carlo mocked city number 8, assuming that they had deliberately destroyed their own walls. With that, the old samurai decided to summon his own dragon, and so began the face-off between the 2 colossal reptiles. Miyamoto Kojiro was certain that his beast would emerge victorious, but just as he finished his sentence, the head of his decapitated lizard fell right in front of him, leaving him and Sanctual Don Carlo speechless. It was Yule who intervened at the last moment to decapitate the green reptile. The protagonist kept patience until the young villain evolved. He then asked Haiju to return and defend their city, yet the girl grew worried about his wounds. Suddenly, the beast tried to attack the man from behind, but was quickly repelled by Yule's powerful blow that knocked him to the ground. And so the protagonist, with an odd expression on his face, decided to finally take care of the young villain as he should. Krishna then asked the man to speed things up if he had a stratagem in mind, since their decoy wouldn't be able to distract the players for long. And with the red player destroying one of the copies, the Greed Lord decided to use 3 javelins in order to damage his 3 adversaries, yet the strongest unit wasn't responding to its player. Meanwhile, both hostile mayors couldn't believe their eyes. Yol kept on bombarding the corrupt serpent with powerful punches. As he kept beating him to a pulp, the protagonist expressed how relieved he was to see the villain turn into a serpent rather than a good dragon. This show terrified the invaders, while Yul explained that the wishing orb turns its user into a corrupt serpent or dragon depending on their actions. He was worried that the young villain might repent from his evil and turn into a dragon. But thankfully, the serpent had been diabolic in both the game and the home world. And so the beast's fear levels reached their peak, which would allow Yule to turn him into his second overlord. And so the high schooler known as Sumwon Kang became his worst enemy, familiar after being absorbed into the book. All the invaders were rendered speechless. With a crazed look on his face, the protagonist turned to them, asking if they still wanted to fight him, leaving them shaking in fear. As for Jack, he was now exhausted, fighting the broken blade. The overlord stated that his master was late. Suddenly, the red player was bombarded with damage. But Yule apologized for the inconvenience, since the recruitment of the new Yule Overlord took longer than anticipated. After reaching a certain level, in every game, players begin to create setups tailor-made for their skills and styles. Yet some let the protagonist choose unique setups. Suddenly, the serpent bit his master in the neck. This tactic granted immense power, in exchange for one risking his own life. And so the young man became infected with the second Overlord's venom, using the high-risk, high-return style. Yol was then possessed by his new familiar and immediately used the passive skill, Avatar of Self-Destruction. This led to the young man being poisoned, which meant that you would receive damage as time passed, but would see his stats increase in exchange, allowing him to butcher the player. Krishna was happy to see it fall. Suddenly, the old man disappeared from the battlefield. The Greed Lord was now the owner of a new game piece. The serpent's passive had a terrible impact on the man's health, but greatly improved his stats as the effect worsened. For Yule, this strategy was the greatest gamble of his life. The young man then struck the second player in the back, making it scream in pain. Yule's powerful blade was able to pierce the monstrosity's exoskeleton. Before using his newfound powers to create a spike made out of an unnamed poison that differed from the villain's poison. But suddenly, the young man was railed by surprise by the third player's barrier. The goblin sword master seemed surprised, as he saw the poison of the corrupt serpent completely immobilizing the player. Not only did it immobilize the creature, but it also greatly weakened it. Yule then told Jack to look above. The first overlord now had another blade in hand, and just like that, the master swordsman obtained a heroic class sword. The poison would soon wear off the red player, and the same goes for Jack, who was surprised to see Neil in his shoulder. The poison goblin felt his power rising as his stats points doubled. The red player would soon regain control over his body, but Jack used his new blade to slay on the spot. That was a close call for the first overlord. But suddenly, the goblin started to cough blood. An unnamed mixture of poison made the green warrior lose consciousness. Meanwhile, Yule faced off against the third player. This was the last opponent. The hideous creature used multiple shields to empower his barrier that would keep repairing itself unless those shields were destroyed, which meant that Yule had to get rid of the barrier and the shields simultaneously. The passive of the serpent stopped Yule from casting his spell as it dealt great damage and increased his vulnerability in exchange for increasing his stats points. But Yule needed more power. The Greed Lord witnessed the battle from afar. Krishna realized that despite using the safest plans for himself, the young man didn't hesitate to put his own life on the line. This made the player curious if this was due to remorse or his own personality. He wished for him to use his mind to the fullest, which is why he was disappointed to see the person limiting his own potential. Yule was now under many negative effects, but each setback granted him more strength. And so the last remaining player charged headfirst at him. The impact caused an immense shock. Yule lost many stats points due to the numerous status effects, but that was a small price to pay in order to obtain the avatar of self-destruction. The startled monster tried to escape, but the protagonist advised him to stay still. Yule was now on the edge, and so he cut through the creature's barrier, slicing him in half. Just like that, the wielder of the book slayed his last foe. With that, the citizens of the defeated city were teleported away. The Greed Lord now had the fate of city number 28, city number 77, and city number 90 in the palm of his hands. And so 3 players were defeated, and Yule was now free from the second overlord's power. Jack came to check on him, so the young man stated that he would soon feel better. The young man decided to give his first overlord Apater as a token of apology for making him risk his life. Jack gladly accepted the heroic class sword. He also noticed the spirit of the new overlord that, despite his bad character, would be needed according to his master. Yet the young man had another reason for gaining this second overlord, since a corrupt serpent who was a failed dragon was unable to keep the wishing orb. In other words, the epic item would soon have a new wielder, and this man happened to be none other than the vengeful Kim. The Greed Lord seemed confused. Dusek also had the same expression on his face. Jayu also found it odd. To Yule's surprise, the mission was still going on. Suddenly, player number 8 received a notification. As a new game piece entered the action, it happened to be the White City of Silence, and Yule Choi couldn't believe his eyes. The Greed Lord didn't expect this reunion to happen this soon. Krishna was now facing the old player number 8, the one he hates and worships, who reached the end of the game with him. The new player number 8 was eager for Yule to defeat his old enemy. The young man couldn't help but notice the Greed Lord's precipitation. Yule decided to end it as quickly as possible. But to the book owner and wielder's surprise, the player versus player auction was deactivated. This was due to the card known as Sanctuary's Effect, which prohibited a one-on-one battle between players, followed by Absolute Seal, which temporarily neutralized the Greed Lord. The card chain and its speed were both amazing. It turns out that the 3 defeated players were nothing more than a ruse to make City Member 8 unveil its tactics, and so Yule and Jack's hands were now tied. They had to risk their lives in combat. Player number 99 was now face to face with the tied-up player number 8. Krishna pointed out that the Golden Hand was always a careful player, which is why it used cards to make sure his old city no longer existed. That he didn't expect to be found so soon, since his preparations were still ongoing. The Greed Lord's eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. as he may have to desert city number 8 himself. Meanwhile, Jack and Yule were rushing to take care of the city mayor as quickly as possible. The hack could only be deployed by players and their fallen counterparts, but it matters not, since Yule considered himself strong enough to face city number 99 without it. And so he requested a list of the city's units from the writ of Krishna. Yule decided to check on the mightiest enemy unit first, but the protagonist couldn't believe his own two eyes. Meanwhile, on the ground level, the lieutenant and his platoon were moving in silence, when they were suddenly ambushed by arrows that Long barely parried with his shield. The lieutenant was amazed to see the enemy predicting all their plans. In the very heart of city number 8, at the same moment, a tornado was created, revealing the epic one-handed sword called Hamosu, a sword of fauna and the blade of a divinity that founded a nation upon arriving on Earth. Its power was able to block the abilities of the smaller deities, which shocked the detective, when suddenly Dusek snatched the weapon away from his wielder's hand. But to his surprise, the enemy's hand was empty. The one-handed sword was now in the hand of another unit. As he was being restrained by the enemy, Dusek realized that they could share equipment. Seo grew worried upon witnessing his partner getting slammed into the ground. Dusek realized that the enemy's attacks were decisive and precise. The detective that came out on top felt like their enemy shared a single mind. But now he and his partner were back to back, surrounded by the units of the White City of Silence. Seeing the enemy attacking his partner infuriated Seo. Dusek proposed to retreat since they were outnumbered, but Seo stated that it would be hard, and so the enemy units raised their swords. Seo and Dusek were preparing for a long fight, but suddenly they found themselves protected by a barrier of green poison. The two policemen were confused since this move belonged to the Gone Serpent. The caster opened them a path through the poison. Kim, the new owner of the Wishing Orb, was struggling to keep the spell on and asked the men to quickly escape. But the policemen were shocked to see this perfect stranger wielding such a powerful item. The sun began to set. With her quick moves, Haiju was doing her best to protect her home. But with one swing of his sword, the blue-eyed knight easily injured the Angel of Flames. The Spear Maiden was confused as her attack could never reach him, yet his blade always hit her no matter how slow it was. This was beyond foreseeing her moves. Haiju felt like the city mayor's will dictated her actions. Yet the persevering Angel of Flames decided to use elixir to restore her health to the fullest. And with all the conditions met, the Spear Maiden used the hidden ability of the Fang of Prominence. Upon arriving, the dragon caused an immense explosion from a single blast. Yet the standing figure behind the smoke startled the Angel of Flames. To her surprise, the city's strongest unit had arrived. The girl had many questions, but the young man ignored all of them and asked her to retreat to the city. When she tried to refuse, her master insisted. The girl was left intrigued when her uneasy master stated that he would stay as a backup for Yule as she returned to their city. And so the Angel of Flames rushed back to city number 8. She noticed that her friend and his overlord weren't at ease, but she also felt as if she would be in the way by staying with them. But Hiju assumed that this was all in her head. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, the blue-eyed knight was surprised to see Yule's grim expression after such a long time. After all, these two were brothers bound by blood. But with a genuine smile on his face, the protagonist expressed his relief to see his brother in good health now. Yule then stated that they didn't have to face each other, but was surprised to see his brother aware of his plan to return to their home world. This was surely something Yule would do. Yet the blue-eyed knight affirmed that he was bound to fail, since in order to do so, Yule would have to win against him, a feat he was never able to accomplish. Suddenly, Jack, who sensed the danger, pushed his master out of the way. To Yule's surprise, his overlord began to disappear, and with a blank face, his brother attacked him. The confused protagonist found himself impaled by the blade of his own blood. The blue-eyed knight wanted his brother to stay dead for a period of time, and promised that once he woke up, he would finally be happy. The sword was now covered in Yule's blood, but the protagonist decided to surprise his brother from behind. However, the blue-eyed knight easily dodged his brother's punch as he stabbed him in the ribs. This left the young man in pain and obligated him to use his powers, and so he tried to strike the mayor of city number 99 with powerful lightning bolts. This attack totally burned the body, yet this wasn't the blue-eyed knight of one of his many allies that he had teleported in to protect himself. He then stepped inside a magic circle. This was an explosive trap that he used magic dispel to quickly neutralize. The blue-eyed knight could foresee his brother's every move. He then stated that it had been a long time since they had played together.